Now she is about to see a world she has never seen before. The faces of people she had never met would be revealed to her in just a moment. The master of ceremonies asks to direct the spotlight on himself. He is ready to begin the performance for one spectator. I wonder what she would do if she woke up one day in an unfamiliar world. She's probably curious about what's going on in this unusual place that will soon become her home. However, she will have plenty of time to understand the main feature of this world. A second ago, the girl was sure that this was a nightmare, but what is happening suggests otherwise. Suddenly, she hears a male voice wanting to give her a special task. Just recently, his beloved woman ran away from him, even though they had signed a marriage contract. The second client's woman also ran away, breaking off their engagement and cutting him out of her life. Unlike these two, the third client's girlfriend misunderstood everything and ended the relationship. She will have to bring all the missing girls back if she plans to continue her private investigation. The problem is that Celia didn't ask to be a detective and is seeing these men for the first time. There is no time for long doubts. Orders need to be fulfilled. A second later, instead of a solid floor under your feet, a huge portal to another dimension appears. With the help of the portal, she will arrive at the destination much faster. A strange voice asks not to worry about anything. The flight through space will not last too long. She will soon learn what role she has been given and what Celia's main purpose is. In the meantime, you can just relax and enjoy the instant movement through the portal. Finally, the MC wishes good luck. The new player will find it very useful. She will have to forget her real name, and in another reality, her name will also become different. She will soon get used to all the changes if the miserable ending of her past life does not repeat itself again. That evening was special in the life of the young girl, as it was her last. From somewhere far away, she seems to hear the voice of the crowd gathered around the ambulance. An absurd early death has long been a cliché for the protagonist who is destined to die. Sparing no effort, she worked her whole life until she was exhausted and eventually found herself completely alone. An orphan without roots, wandering everywhere, finds his only peace. Before her death, the plots of the last novellas that Celia had managed to read flashed through her head. Most likely, she will be reborn in one of the harmless stories, becoming a minor character. But what if, when she opens her eyes, she sees in the mirror the reflection of a noble lady from a romantic fantasy? Or will it be a world of knights and hunters where ferocious monsters roam everywhere? Like any girl in her place, she would most like to get into a modern romance. She was almost certain that she would be reborn in one of these stories. However, upon opening her eyes, the girl immediately finds herself in a strange genre, unlike all the others. It took Celia some time to process what had happened and understand what she had to do. She had never seen this girl, in whose body she would live her next life. Judging by the dirt accumulated in the room, this house had been abandoned by its owners long ago. It's not very pleasant to start a new life, having been reborn in such a neglected place. She certainly didn't become one of the noble ladies of romantic fantasy, which is what she had long dreamed of. On the table there is a sign with a woman's name and an official business license. If this is true, she is the head of some bureau, although the scope of services is not entirely clear. At this moment, a strange thing catches your eye, which stands out strongly in the office. Someone carefully placed a bouquet of beautiful flowers with a card on the table, as secret admirers usually do. However, after reading the short message, she realizes that the letter was not written by her suitor at all. Celia's colleagues congratulate her on the opening of her agency, wishing her small business prosperity. Typically in fantasy worlds, such heroines barely make ends meet by helping the main characters. Sometimes they have to endure beatings as if others only see them as a punching bag. It also happens that informants extort money from unfortunate victims, taking advantage of their vulnerability. But this time, everything is different. Instead of beatings and deprivation, she is awarded $500 in cash. In addition, a strange voice suggests starting a new mission when the first client appears in the office. This gentleman is already at the door. Celia must prepare for the meeting. While running an agency may not be exactly exciting, you can't start a new life with a refusal. Moreover, by refusing the rich gentleman, she risks making enemies and repeating the tragic ending. At this point, the first client realizes that he has never in his life encountered such a dirty agency. He hoped that places like this had servants whose job it was to clean them daily. One look from the gloomy gentleman can kill, but it's better not to show it. His eyes seem so empty, as if death had long since settled somewhere in the depths of his soul. The girl is waiting for the first words from the agency's new client, whose owner she accidentally became. It's strange, but instead of greeting, he continues to silently watch her actions. The rainy weather outside adds even more gloom to her new life. However, the stranger's crew still waits at the entrance until the owner finishes his business at the agency. Over a cup of fresh tea, the girl admits that the agency opened only recently. This is the only place the young master can turn to for help. But this is truly the first time he's seen such a shabby office. You never expect such a reception. In response, she asks to get straight to the point, without paying attention to the temporary disorder. The client immediately throws a thick stack of papers on the table, which contain all the information about the new assignment. It's a little strange that this gentleman's main task is to find a missing woman. The young woman's name is Chelsea, and she has actually managed to anger the Marquise. Just recently, he could not have imagined that after a happy life together, the day of their divorce would come. It is unclear what prompted her to take this step, but the decision was final. The stupid woman dared to leave him, but he had done a lot for his wife. Without any permission, she ended a strong relationship by suddenly announcing her departure. Seeing the client's passion for this, Celia begins to understand the real reason. If she were in the unfortunate girl's place, she wouldn't have been able to stand such a tone either. Having told the most necessary information, the Marquis leaves a bag of coins, offering to accept an advance payment. He gives only a week to find a wife, and it will be better if Celia does not disappoint her first client. If she fails the task, she risks never seeing the morning sun again. With these words, the gentleman hurriedly walks out the door, promising to return in a week. At this moment, she sees the notification window for the first time. She is given a mission to find her missing wife. The punishment for failing to complete the mission will be death at the hands of an angry husband. This was too brutal a mission for a first assignment, especially since the man was clearly not himself. You can't believe his words that he regrets the departure of his beloved woman. She already realized that she was dealing with a hardened psychopath who was obsessed with his power. For a while, Celia tries to remember the title of the novel, but nothing comes to mind. It seems she had never read this novel. The girl would certainly remember a similar plot. Considering the character of the main character, this novel should be exciting and have interesting scenes. By the way, she will never know the unforgettable ending if she cannot find his missing wife. Moreover, he gave too little time, only a week, to find the person. However, Celia decides to see the case through to the end, since she has found herself in the role of a private agent. In all novels with similar plots, runaway wives are always caught or miraculously found themselves. The small problem is that she doesn't know the original plot or the wife's location. Having said these words, she suddenly sees a glow above her head, taking on a strange shape. A few seconds later, a voice congratulates her on acquiring her own library. She can choose any book from the current collection available in her inventory. For example, there is a novel about a divorced couple who entered into a prenuptial agreement. On the pages of this book, she will be able to find the necessary information that describes the Marquise's situation. The plot also includes a heroine whose uncle becomes her guardian after the tragic death of her parents. He accepted her into the family only in order to take all the fortune and the family business for himself. The only way to escape this hell is to enter into a contract marriage with Marcus Graydon. The girl knew that such a marriage would become a real darkness, in which there was no place for love and happiness. However, she manages to find peace and comfort in this chaos, creating a warm atmosphere within the family. Despite her husband's cold appearance, she baked him his favorite cookies, which he ate after breakfast. Fortunately, the Dowager Marchioness welcomed her into her home and even trusted her with the family jewels. Perhaps this was the very happiness that the girl desired from the very beginning, but all hopes are shattered after the Marquise's mother dies unexpectedly. Broken happiness gradually turns into quarrels, and then a completely logical divorce occurs. Finding herself alone with her husband, she admits that there is no longer any point in marriage. The contract was only valid for as long as his mother was alive. In response, the man angrily demands that she shut up. She has no right to discard him like an object. He is sure that everything should be under his complete control, even those close to him. She does not dare to take a single step without receiving the consent of her legal spouse. It was the first day when the girl first learned the true character of her husband. She can hardly believe what she heard. The Marquis is behaving like a cruel tyrant. Reading the story, Celia seems to become its heroine herself, imbued with the feelings of the unhappy wife. It turns out that in the original story, Marquis Graydon was an obsessed psychopath. After reading the novel to the end, she will be able to find out where her runaway wife is hiding right now. If that's the case, the first step is quite simple, because you just need to read the novel and get your wife back. Celia knew there was a catch to this case. The next chapters couldn't be unlocked for free. After waiting for the cash to be credited, she finally gets access to new chapters of the novel she has chosen. As they say, a great detective must always be on top of his game to successfully solve cases. The voice tells her that she can earn more cash by solving similar cases. The more cash you have, the easier it is to solve complex human search missions. The current cash deposit station is the Marquis of Graydon's estate. The voice advises to go there right now if the girl still hopes to earn a little money. A short time later, Celia arrives at the new cash loading station. Approaching the door, she tries to remember everything she thought about on the way here. However, instead of the Marquis's office, she accidentally ends up in the room of his ex-wife, Chelsea Graydon. Mr. Marquis ordered the servants to assist the detective in everything, so she need not be shy. Having thanked the servants, the girl hopes to be left alone so that no one will interfere with her work. If she conducts an investigation at the Marquis's estate, she will be able to get a lot more cash. All that remains is to decide where to begin investigating your first case. Without wasting any time, she decides to examine every nook and cranny of the room. There must be valuable evidence here. During their happy family years, the newlyweds looked out this window when they were alone. The cups from which the main characters often drank tea are also on Chelsea's table. There must be some place around here that Celia can get a ton of cash for. This letter must have been deliberately hidden away so that no one could read it. In the letter, the Baron asks to immediately come to the Larman estate, wishing to receive an answer. The wording of the message is too short, but the Baron definitely lives in the family home of Chelsea. Judging by the tone of the letter, he seemed to be ordering people to come to the estate, not wanting to tolerate any objections. According to the story, Chelsea entered into an arranged marriage only because she wanted to escape from her family. In that case, it is unclear why she still maintains contact with them. Besides work, there are other things that sometimes come naturally. Celia had never been in such a luxurious room as the one owned by the main character. It would be a real crime against herself if she didn't take advantage of the chance to have some fun. It's a completely different standard of living compared to my decrepit office. As expected, the feeling is simply amazing, especially if Celia was here alone. The maids did not expect that the new guest of their estate would behave so languidly. Detectives usually do their work differently, but this girl was clearly not used to normal work. Realizing that they have arrived at the wrong time, the maids apologize for their sudden visit. The humiliating scene happens at the very beginning, and yet she only allowed herself to go too far for a second. At this moment, Celia again hears the voice informing her of the danger. Having discovered the dusty box, the maids decide to throw it away, especially since the mistress will not appear again. The box contains an item that may pose a serious threat to life. Still not understanding what is going on, Celia asks not to make any sudden movements without knowing the contents of this box. In this case, the maid can simply take it outside, and later it will be taken to the landfill along with the trash. In response, she snatches the object from his hands, promising to personally throw it away from the house. With such strange behavior, she surprises the maids even more. Celia would not have done such a thing without hearing a warning about the danger. No one is watching it, which means you can safely open the box and see everything for yourself. She hopes there is no bomb hidden in the box, otherwise the plot of her new story will end in the estate. It turned out that it contained something that would later bring Celia $800 in cash. The seed box is very valuable, so why is it rated as a high hazard? In addition, she is awarded another $500 in cash for entering the room of the Marquise's mother. After a short time, the girl gathers the servants in one place as the main witnesses. The maid admits that the master's widowed mother was very fond of fruit, but there is no other information. Then she suddenly remembers that the deceased lady's maiden family constantly sent fruits. Besides, the lady was crazy about greenhouses. It was her long-standing little hobby. After her death, the young master's runaway wife ate the fruits in complete solitude. For a long time, Chelsea shared the fruits with her servants, but then she stopped doing so. The maid chatted a little with the detective. Her cunning friends had already run off to lunch. That's right, you can't skip lunch, even if it concerns an important investigation. Meanwhile, Celia's work is just beginning. She hasn't had time to inspect everything yet. It felt like something had happened between the widowed mother and the young wife. Suddenly, a small handwritten gardening notebook catches my eye. For finding this valuable item, the girl is awarded $700 in cash. It's even more than the reward for opening the widowed mother's room. Surely the notebook must contain something that will help uncover the secrets of the Marquise's runaway wife. From the first lines, she understands that she is holding in her hands a letter from the widow addressed to Chelsea. Mr. Marquis's mother writes that she wants to give the girl her favorite greenhouse. All the herbs, flowers, and trees collected during her life now belong to her. Chelsea is free to do what she wants with it and consider herself the true mistress. She is confident that the girl will take care of them better than anyone else in the family. Only her caring hands can preserve the labors that led to the creation of such a magnificent greenhouse. It turns out that the widow treated Chelsea like her daughter, and this relationship existed from the very first day of marriage. If this is true, then there are even more questions, and Celia's main version was wrong. For a long time, the girl tries to compare the found clues and the maid's testimony. In the original story, Chelsea was clearly attracted to the widowed mother, as is clear from their dialogue. So, why does she refuse the inheritance and run away from home, one step away from her dream coming true? Of course, a greenhouse may well arouse suspicion, but this is not enough to justify a divorce from a husband. After reviewing the collected data, she begins to realize that she has missed some important detail. At this moment, a loud male voice thanks for today's work. In his opinion, she behaves quite calmly, even when she is in a stranger's house. Only now does Celia realize that the Marquis has been watching her from afar for a long time. But it seems that with his unexpected appearance, he gave the girl a good hint. The novel's main male character played a significant role in his wife's escape. The client reminds them that they have too little time to look at ordinary things for a long time. However, she lacks information. Celia asks to be given the opportunity to enter her mother's room again. She had already entered the room in the morning, but the maids had somewhat prevented her from fully exploring the room. A few minutes later, the owner of the house brings the girl back into the room. Almost nothing has changed here, except that the maids have done a good job of cleaning the room. Once again, the voice reports the high level of danger in this room, confirming Celia's suspicions. However, it then becomes clear that the danger in the room is created by the owner of the house himself. He asks not to delay with this. If the detective wants to find something, he needs to start right now. There's nothing to be done. We have to obediently fulfill the demands of the owner of the estate. I can't believe she came all this way just to look at the bookshelf. The Marquis was sure that she would have the audacity to delve into his personal archives. She would love to do it, but she doesn't want to say goodbye to her life at such an age. By the way, if Lady Chelsea had any unusual habits, Celia asks to tell her about them in more detail. After thinking for a bit, he remembers that there really was one such habit. Chelsea loved to eat the fruits that her family sent her almost every day. Once she even forbade anyone to touch them, declaring that the fruits belonged only to her. This is very strange, because the girl literally forced herself to eat fruits that she never liked. According to the maids, she forbade anyone else to eat them, even her regular servants. At this point, a thought comes to mind. Perhaps Chelsea was doing something strange with the fruit. She asks to tell him whether his runaway wife could have been collecting the seeds of the fruits sent. The Marquis is no less surprised than she is. The detective has indeed revealed a strict secret. Fruits and seeds are somehow connected with the greenhouse, hence the guess. Celia asks for one more favor. She wants to get into the greenhouse right now. At this moment, she notices a book that the heroine often looked at when she lived in the estate. Next to the book on the table are her signature cookies, but the Marquis never got a chance to try them. He asks not to do this. Now is not the best time to visit the greenhouse. However, it is difficult to resist a demand when a person looks at you too strangely. Looking back at the girl, the Marquis asks her to explain what her intent gaze is about. But first, Celia wants to hear a truthful explanation of why he took off his wedding ring. The Marquis reminds that the client should not answer such questions from the hired detective. However, she wonders if the removal of the ring is connected with changes in his family relationship with his wife. Of course, he may not answer if a simple question causes the Marquis inconvenience. After a short silence, he admits that throughout their entire life together, he tried to give this woman the best. The decision to get married was made so suddenly that there was not enough time to buy a good ring. But even so, she considered this trinket very beautiful, as if it had been made in the most expensive workshop in the world. A pink diamond had recently been discovered in the quarry, and the Marquis decided that it would suit her better. Chelsea probably thought that his feelings for her had cooled. He shouldn't have taken off his wedding ring. She explains that something like this would break any lady's heart, and Chelsea is no exception. And yet, the young master does not understand why the relationship should change after the ring is removed. The main thing is that Celia already guesses that half the success of the new business is in her pocket. Now her task is simply to find her missing wife, after which the Marquis will heal her heart. When Chelsea returns home, he is obliged to properly explain himself to his wife, apologizing for the mistake. Hearing the demand to apologize to the woman, the gentleman briefly interrupts the conversation. At the same time, Celia is almost sure that she gave an excellent speech. At this moment, a system notification pops up. After increasing her rank, a new system becomes available to her. It turns out that for completing any task, the system awards a new rank. This could help her a lot. She needs to study everything as soon as she has a free minute. At this point, she has already earned enough cash to update her inventory. There's more and more good news, and the game gradually starts to draw you into the process. She decides to go back to reading the original story, where she can find the missing information. The final pages of the novel are full of fear, and it is there that the heroine decides to run away from her husband. But the main thing is that she sees the reason for the disagreement in herself. In her reflection, Chelsea sees the culprit of all her troubles, who cannot be forgiven. She quietly opens the door, hoping to remain unnoticed by her husband. At least a month had passed since she had last eaten the fruit she had brought. She had long felt that she was at her limit, but today this feeling became even stronger. Chelsea have never gone this long without them, meaning time is now working against them. If this continues, her husband will find out about everything before she leaves the house. At that moment, she suddenly sees the Marquis in front of her. For some reason, he woke up late at night. Chelsea explains that she just wanted to wash her hands, intending to head back to the bedroom. The truth is that the wife looks too exhausted. The husband cannot help but notice it. Closing her eyes, she admits that lately she often feels too cold. The girl asks the Marquis to hug her tighter, warming her cold body with his warmth. It's time to remember how their relationship began and what it has become now. While in his arms, Chelsea tells him that this marriage will only ruin everyone's lives. At that moment, she remembers that she took off her wedding ring, once again realizing that her husband is not being sincere. From the very beginning, he pretended to be a loving husband, and even now he continues to play the role. The Marquis promises to call a doctor to the house, believing that Chelsea is slightly ill. She once wanted to believe that everything was real, but now it no longer makes sense. In that last minute, Chelsea realizes that she will soon leave the walls of this mansion forever. On the night of the next full moon, she intends to head to the harbor, erasing the past from her life. This is how the episode of the original plot ends, but it is not the end of the whole story. Moreover, this time a new character appears in the plot. Having received an emergency mission, the detective asks the coachman to drive the horses all the way to the harbor. She can't let Chelsea escape, or her first mission will fail miserably. It was too late to tell the Marquis about this, so she ran out into the street without thinking. However, Chelsea's current situation is much worse than the novel's original plot suggests. Since childhood, the fruit Chelsea was fed at the Viscount's estate contained a dangerous poison. Stopping the poison would destroy her immediately, so the girl was kept at their feet. Celia thought that she only had to settle the misunderstanding with the Marquis by successfully completing the task. However, now she must find a way to rid the heroine of the poison's effects. If you remember, at the very beginning, she wanted to enjoy a romantic life in a fantasy world. The system suggests taking a look at this. There is something unusual for Celia. She had no idea that there was a stat enhancement shop in this world. This is the very same system update that the player received along with the rank increase. Today is the night of discounts, where she can buy equipment at the best price. Any girl in her place would not refuse the offer, even if the things were not needed. Celia quickly becomes engrossed in discount shopping, allowing her to forget about work for a while. Moreover, the journey to the harbor is quite long, and you can do your shopping right in the carriage. After some time, the noise on the shore begins to increase, and very soon the ship sets sail. Almost everyone in this place wants to board a sea vessel as soon as possible, except for one strange, brooding girl named Chelsea Graydon. The captain's mate orders everyone to come on board. They are leaving any minute now. Before entering the deck, Chelsea suddenly feels someone's hand on her shoulder. Turning around, she tries to understand who needed to unceremoniously stop her. The stranger immediately apologizes for her impudent act, but she has to explain something to her. It seemed to her that the lady looked unwell, as if she needed a doctor's help. If she forgot her medicine or something like that, she should take care of herself and come back before it's too late. In response, Chelsea thanks her for her concern, but none of this is necessary. Celia needs to find another way to make his wife return to the estate to her husband. For example, one can recall the Marquis's late mother, with whom the girl was very close. However, there is something else that needs to be discussed first. Celia declares that with Chelsea's departure to another country, the flowers in the abandoned greenhouse will wither forever. If she's going to give up everything and just run away, she's breaking her biggest promise. The ship may return, but lost time cannot be regained. Therefore, Celia hopes that later she will not regret her choice, which cannot be changed. This is the main feature of her husband, because the Marquis will not be able to forgive it. Hearing these words, Chelsea suddenly realizes that she has been very mistaken for a long time. She warmly thanks the stranger for opening her eyes to what was previously in the shadows. Without a word, Chelsea decides to head away from the harbor so that she can soon find herself back home. This task turned out to be even easier than all the others. You just need to be able to choose the right words. Overhearing the conversation between two sailors, Celia suddenly realizes that she saved the heroine's life a minute ago. The atmosphere was already quite tense, but after she left, everyone became even more flustered. The guys regret that they couldn't keep Chelsea. They had some plans for this girl. Be that as it may, now it's all behind us and we can relax, at least for a little while. It must be said that Celia is not so easy in her new image. She can be quite pleased with the result. Finally, we can breathe freely. The main adventure of today has come to an end. In the end, she was able to prevent Chelsea from boarding the ship. All that was left was to correct a small misunderstanding. But if everything is clear with these two, what ending is in store for her own story? What should she do after the relationship between Marquis and Chelsea is completely mended? After all, the story shouldn't end with the girl being sent back to the real world. Before she could think about it, she suddenly noticed a very strange piece of luggage nearby. It looks suspicious. The luggage is really much heavier than all the other things. At this moment, Celia's observation skill improves by 1 level. She notices human hair sticking out from a crack in a huge wooden box. If she didn't mix anything up, this is the next task. There really is a man in that box who has been locked up for a long time. The boy doesn't yet know that his presence in the box has already been discovered by a budding detective. The idea is pure madness, but she won't be able to turn a blind eye to the crime so easily. The voice had already warned her that this place was highly dangerous, but things were worse. Now it's clear why the inventory store was so persistently offering her a fog generator. By turning on the disposable generator and throwing it on the deck, she will gain time. Everyone except Celia will be briefly blinded while she carries out an urgent task for the system. Without wasting precious seconds, the girl takes a long run towards the luggage. The main thing is to hit the exact spot where the hidden victim is currently being held. She throws the fog generator quite hard, hoping that she won't miss at the most crucial moment. The situation requires her intervention, otherwise there will be simply no one to help the prisoner. Having pulled the box with difficulty, the senior sailor orders the assistant to put it right there. They intend to show this to the boss. The boy will not do something stupid by trying to escape. Last time, their boss was too nervous when he accepted the previous order. The man believes that he was dissatisfied with the work done because the guys always bring the wrong slaves. Noticing a bright flash in the sky, he realizes that a strange object is approaching the ship. A few seconds later, the fog generator hit its target, appearing near the wooden box. Once it touches the ground, it starts generating fog automatically. The boys had never seen anything like this in their lives, but who dared to ruin their work? The boy pressed himself against the box, hoping that something like a boarding attack wasn't happening outside. There is no need to worry about this. The strange stranger does not wish him any harm. On the contrary, the girl extends her hand to him, demanding that he get to his feet and not delay in doing so. Otherwise, they'll both be sitting in that damn box, tied up with ropes. It's hard to imagine what was going on in the young man's head, but he will forever remember the face of his savior. Meanwhile, the ship's senior sailor is convinced that the invaders are trying to steal the goods right from under their noses. He demands that the fugitive be found, otherwise the boss will put one of these guys in a box. Thanks to the fog, Celia not only gains time, but also has excellent control over the situation. However, there is a man on deck who will not be so easily fooled. He asks not to do anything stupid. It is too wrong to steal his goods. Before taking other people's things, the boss advises asking permission from their rightful owners. It is unclear how the young man managed to get through the fog, but it is better to think about it later. He didn't act like the other sailors, as if he was quite familiar with manners. When he talks about his legitimate product, the boss means a tied-up boy. This is exactly how he treats people whom he intends to sell to get rich. At first, the boy wants to let go of his hand and give the sweet girl a chance to escape. But this is too unlike Celia. She decides to stay here until the very end. The girl will leave the deck of the ship only if the unfortunate child leaves with her. Such luxury costs a lot of money. First, you have to pay the ransom of the prisoner. Moreover, the boss becomes curious about whose face is hidden under the visor of this cute cap. However, no one shares his desire. Celia has a much better idea. Choosing the right moment, she bites the guy's hand with all her strength, using the very last technique. The girl is allowed to use such techniques, although a second knee strike in this situation would not be superfluous. Having quickly fought off the boss, she heads towards the shore, where she can take cover. The stranger's reaction was quite funny. He hadn't met such brave, cute creatures for a long time. The sailor assures that the fugitives will be caught, and the boy will receive the punishment he deserves. He advises to leave them. The guy still had doubts about choosing this order. However, Keschel has no doubt that it was the girl who bit his hand. Meanwhile, the fugitives manage to find a suitable place where they can hide for a while. The ship doesn't stay at the shore for too long anyway because of one runaway boy. No one is pursuing them anymore. You can be sure that this task has also been completed. She probably hadn't experienced anything like this for a long time, but she still remained alive and unharmed. Because of this guy, Celia had to run away as if they were participating in a race. If we take into account his appearance, he clearly resembles the main character, even eclipsing Marquis Graydon. For saving the young man, she is again offered to take a reward in the form of an addition to the library. Because of the system, the girl can't even choose a book herself, relying on its taste every time. However, she often gives out exactly those books on the pages of which Celia finds clues. The boy turned out to be too skinny, and his body was covered with fresh abrasions. The jet-black hair and tired, haggard look are reminiscent of a long-forgotten character. A young man with black hair, sold into slavery, is the best combination for the main character. At that moment, Celia realized for the first time that she was on the trail of the system's main secret. Looking closely at him, she really sees the main character of the novel. It turns out that in this world there are other storylines besides the story of the Marquis and his runaway wife. Then the new world is not one continuous novel, but weaves together all the books read into one. Life After Reincarnation is a mixture of all the stories she knows. It can be called a collection of works, but the authors of the stories are completely different. And Celia finds herself at the center of it all, trying to find a common thread. She is here to ensure that the heroes of all stories can safely reach a happy ending. The question of what kind of ending is in store for her remains unanswered. If this is the case, it will be Celia who will guide the characters and the storylines of their destinies. After this, she again remembers that psycho on the ship, realizing that he is also the main character. The chances of getting into some crazy trouble increase significantly if you consider that all the plots are intertwined. Celia was in deep trouble, and then there was that silent boy from the wooden box. He looks at her as a savior, and this is how he will remember the girl for the rest of his life. One thing is clear, the system never offers tasks just like that. They always mean something. And if the boy caught her eye, now she is obliged to find out a little about his life. This will have to be done even if Celia is involved in the story of a novel about which she knows nothing. To begin with, the girl asks to state her name. It would be ridiculous to simply go home. Damon immediately introduces himself by name. He has always been a little shy with strangers. Even though Celia smiles back, something tells me there will be big problems with this sweet boy. He appears to be quite timid, especially when he looks down. Those eyes scream that he has a difficult past that he has yet to learn about. Damon admits that he has no one. He is used to living alone and relying only on himself. There isn't even a guardian for whom an unmarried girl is perfectly suited. The young man resembles the type of protagonist who wandered the streets until he met the heroine. Be that as it may, a person like Celia should never show her concern. The truth is that just by looking at his face, you want to spit on everything and lend a helping hand. She decides to find out if there is at least a place where the young man can spend the night peacefully and rest. The answer to this question has long been ready, although he is embarrassed to admit it. With questions like these, the girl puts too much pressure on Damon, making him blush. Even if he is the main character, the boy will only become a strong man in the future. Now he is a lonely child who has no one but himself and this cold street. Celia cannot remain indifferent to the fate of this young man. She extends her hand to Damon. The boy can go with her if he really has nowhere to stay for the night. This place is not very attractive, but it is better than an empty street. At least here he will be able to warm up and eat after long, hungry days. Having taken this step, Celia spends some time reflecting on the correctness of her choice. She herself was very exhausted, first saving the family from a quarrel, and then saving the boy. Tomorrow the Chelsea Graydon case will be closed, at least one less problem to worry about. We just need to make sure that Chelsea has definitely returned to her husband's estate. If you think about it, is Celia fit for the role that is prepared for her in the new world? In her past life, she was an ordinary girl from a poor family who had neither money nor connections. However, what was most painful was to acknowledge a fact that was worse than poverty and other deprivations. Celia always realized that in this world she was absolutely of no use to anyone, existing as if separately. Perhaps this is why the girl became so fascinated with reading stories about the transmigration of souls. Each character in the novel has their place in the plot, and there are people who need them. They share sorrows and joys, fulfilling their destiny and living this life with meaning. But who knew that, having become the heroine of one of these novellas, Celia would become an ordinary behind-the-scenes detective? The system is even ready to give her cheating abilities as long as she completes the tasks. Turning around, she sees Damon again, walking almost silently. He says that he recently finished washing and decided to talk a little before going to bed. Water from his wet hair drips onto the wooden floor, which could cause mold. Having come to her senses a little, Celia warns that this could make you sick and then require a long time to recover. It's better to sit by the fireplace, as this will help it dry much faster after taking a bath. Even helpless kittens probably dry their fur much better than Damon does. However, you can wait a little while until he finishes. They are in no hurry anyway. Unable to bear the strange sight, Celia decides to take the initiative into her own hands, otherwise he will dry them until the morning. She explains that she is simply worried about the clumsy boy he really is, at risk of getting sick. You don't have to worry about anything. Celia will do everything herself while Damon is warming up. The heat from the fireplace is increasing with every minute. It will soon become very warm here. Unexpectedly, the boy promises to fulfill any request if she needs anything. You just have to give the order and Damon will do anything unless it involves killing a person. In all other respects, he is entirely left to Celia. You can trust him as you would yourself. This admission makes the towel fall out of your hands, and now you won't be able to dry your hair with it. Damon said these words with a serious tone, as if he was truly ready to do anything for Celia. However, she must understand him correctly. The boy owes his life for his salvation. Considering the renunciation with which the girl had lived before, she was hearing such a confession for the first time. She has to explain that Celia only saved him because he was in danger. In other words, if it had been anyone else in Damon's place, she would have done exactly the same thing. Therefore, she does not expect gratitude in return, nor any offers of help. Strangely enough, the boy seemed offended to hear such a harsh response from his savior. She didn't want to offend him at all, but she had to tell the truth. No one knows what thoughts are going through this young man's head. It's better to discuss such things right away. However, Damon is not so simple. He decides to repay for the help by cleaning the whole house. Is it really so dirty where Celia lives that even a boy couldn't get used to it? She feels awkward talking about it, but she's had a lot of work these past few days, and there's simply no time left for cleaning. Finally, the girl decides to stop this, otherwise he will have to clean the house until the morning. This is not what she meant at all when she suggested staying the night and warming ourselves by the fireplace. It feels like the boy isn't even listening to what his owner is telling him. Noticing a broken can, he decides to remove it from here before someone gets hurt. Celia grabs his hand in time. She is quite capable of dealing with this on her own. Damon believes that if she saw the broken jar, she should have removed it much earlier. In response, she once again asks the boy to not pay attention to the details and just rest a little. He doesn't need it at all. He's not tired at all and wants to be useful. Damon is sure that she is going to leave him because he is too useless. However, he will be able to prove his worth when Celia sees his abilities in action. It is impossible to explain to such children that sometimes no one expects a favor from you in return. After saving her and providing her with a place to stay, he feels indebted to this girl. Until the debt is fully repaid, the boy will not be able to relax. It seems she will have to accept this and give him the opportunity to thank himself. It's a pity that he just recently washed himself, and now he's dirty again after unnecessary cleaning. Celia asks to give her hand. She can't go to bed with such dirty hands. His hands were dirty again, as if he had never visited the bathroom at all. This boy must have suffered a lot, because his hands are so badly scratched. The used rag can be thrown away a little later. The girl will wash it herself. She pulls the rag out so abruptly that you have to apologize for your strange behavior. Suddenly, Damon asks not to be sent out into the street. He really has nowhere to go. Instead of rejecting him because he is useless, it is better to give him the opportunity to prove himself. He doesn't mind at all if Celia uses him as her faithful dog. It was for this purpose that they tried to kidnap Damon, making him an excellent slave. Now it is clear how he survived all this time, while he was floating alone with the flow of life. He assures that he will not ask for much food, and besides, the boy can get a job. If he doesn't know, grown women are perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. Without a penny in her pocket, she couldn't have brought him into this house, isn't that clear? Since he himself deigned to do everything that Celia ordered, the girl had one task to perform. You should listen carefully and not say that you didn't hear well. After 5 seconds, he must spread jam on the bread and then calmly eat it, washing it down with milk. Once Damon has eaten his fill, he is obliged to go to his room and simply go to bed. According to Celia, the only things that can be expected from children are proper nutrition and sound, healthy sleep. These are his main duties, besides which there is nothing else. If he understood everything, the girl asks to carry out the order right now. Tomorrow they will see each other again, only now the boy should not bother her with such nonsense. It's worth considering that tomorrow she will check how well he completed the task. If he tries to cheat again, it will be a severe reprimand. After a while, Damon completes his assignments, eats his fill, and goes to bed. This is the simplest order he has ever carried out in his short life. Usually the orders were much harsher, and besides, no one rewarded the boy with tasty food. It's hard to remember the last time he went to bed on a comfortable, wide bed with a warm room. The tasks that were assigned to the young man were always something forbidden. One of the first such tasks was beating up a whole group of unfamiliar guys. One could say that that day became a real test for the young man who was opening the door to life. After beating up everyone in the room, he received approval from his boss. The man recalled that it was this act that made him a special boy. If Damon doesn't want to be thrown into the trash, he has to do it every time. It was for this reason that he was not at all afraid when he learned that he would be sold into slavery. Seeing the new merchandise, Keschel realizes that his people have brought a real child on board. It's hard to tell how old this boy is, but it's clear that he's not fit for hard work. Listening to their conversations, Damon hopes that the bandits will simply get rid of him. Instead, the boss orders the boy to be placed in a large box, and he will deal with him later. Thus, he ended up in the luggage that Celia noticed from afar during the mission. She is the first person in Damon's life who so bravely extended a hand in a dangerous moment. Even at the cost of her own life, the girl is ready to save someone she meets for the first time. It is not difficult to understand what thoughts flashed through the young man's head when he saw Celia in front of him. He will try until the end of his days to repay a debt that can only be repaid by saving in return. Fortunately, both managed to escape safely, leaving the ill-fated ship behind. The handcuffs are still there, too. They will no longer be needed by the one who has become freer than the wind. Now in his room, the boy remembers it as a past life. He doesn't understand what Celia really wants from a poor orphan with no connections. However, he is confident that over time it will still change, just like all previous owners. Eventually, he will start to irritate the girl with his sad appearance. And yet, I want to believe that at least tomorrow he will be able to spend the night again in warmth and comfort. I would like to forget, at least for a couple of days, the hell that this life has been from the very beginning. Meanwhile, Celia is restless, wondering about the cute boy's motives. She perfectly understands his feelings, which can no longer be changed by anything. Now we have to come up with a plan to make Damon leave of his own free will. No one doubted that at this very moment the system would again offer a new item. The book contains useful information for those who are always looking for reasons to worry. The author notes that obsession is a common problem, but in reality it is just a fantasy. The book turned out to be too long, and she had already spent the whole day at work. By the way, it would be better if strangers didn't see this. Realizing that the boy is already awake, Celia apologizes for her appearance. She didn't want to appear like this. It was a little awkward to show herself so sloppy. However, if the boy himself came to her office, it's time for him to learn something very important. Celia announces that she is actually the head of a private detective agency. He will work as her assistant for some time until she finds a professional. In other words, from this day on, he can consider her his director, who provided him with a place to stay in exchange for help. Damon himself asked to be sheltered, but he wanted to at least be of some use to Celia. So an assistant will be very useful, especially one so sweet and charming. Celia understands that no one but her is capable of taking in a little orphan. It seemed to work. He really believed in the need for an assistant director. The book said to ask for a small favor so that he wouldn't feel like he was indebted. Since he is the new assistant, Celia is responsible for providing him with food and shelter. A small allowance for a beginning assistant is also included in the list provided by the director. However, before leaving, the girl suddenly stops abruptly in front of the door. The boy begins to guess that the main catch of the job is about to be revealed. The main thing is that he should not leave the office without the director's permission. There is no catch. You just need to be here and wait for Celia's instructions. If he gets bored, Damon can pick up any of the books and read something useful for himself. These were the last words the young man heard before the office door closed. It is clear that such working conditions do not exist anywhere else in the city. It was no coincidence that Celia advised the boy to read more. She knows very well the benefits of reading. The funny thing is that in the book the author advises to do this trick to get rid of an unwanted guest. In the end, she did everything to keep Damon in her office forever. And yet, that moment when the boy got excited from hearing the words was really very cute. Someday, Damon will look back on what happened as a grown-up protagonist. Celia won't forget his appearance either. He's a bit funny with that guilty expression. But he'd better get back to his original story soon. That's more important. Just in case, the girl left a small bag of coins near the office door. When he leaves, she will miss her charming assistant a little. After a short while, Celia asks the client to listen and not interrupt her. She said this too insistently, forgetting about the character of Monsieur Marquis. Realizing that his wife had been found, the Marquis was ready to go after her anywhere. Finding the right moment, she admits that right now the girl is in the greenhouse. It was in her name that the Marquise's late mother left this wonderful place. In her opinion, only Chelsea's hands can take care of her main creation in life. This girl's past was really complicated. People always tried to deceive her. After the death of her parents, the baby was entrusted to her uncle named Viscount Larman. Knowing the original plot of the novel, Celia understands perfectly well what kind of scoundrel fate has brought her face to face with. He wanted to get his hands on the puppet by convincing it to eat the poisoned fruit. At first, she was a little afraid to do it, but the Viscount assured her that it was completely safe. For a long time, she was forced to live in a cramped room, doing all the housework. But the poisoned fruit completely deprived her of freedom, which was already too little. Contrary to her uncle's promises, eating the fruit did not make the girl stronger. On the contrary, with every piece of fruit she ate, she felt tired and weak. He continued to insist that such a fragile body needed to eat more fruits to grow healthy. This is the only way to get rid of diseases, by strengthening the immune system with vitamins. Until she ate the fruit, the man watched closely, standing nearby. One day, at the common table, the Viscount's own daughter asked for the same healthy fruit for herself. In response, the uncle admitted that such fruits are rare and are only needed by people with poor health. Chelsea was sure that with these words, her uncle was hiding his true love for his daughter from her. Even after her marriage, her uncle continued to send poisoned fruits to the Marquise's house. One day, she suddenly noticed how his mother was suffering from an unbearable long cough. She assures that everything is fine with her and that she spent so much time on the summer veranda in vain. It was on that day that Chelsea decided to share her medicinal fruits with her husband's mother. She gave the fruit, believing it had healing properties, although over time it only got worse. One day, my uncle suddenly announced that he would no longer be able to send them this month. Realizing that there is too little fruit left, she decides to grow it herself on the estate grounds. Upon entering the greenhouse, Chelsea realizes that all the plants in it have dried out except for one sprout. Another oddity was the discovery of a handwritten journal with advice on plant care. On one of the pages, she notices something strange, which she will later write about in her notebook. The records contained information about a cursed seed that could affect a person's consciousness. The fruit sprouts quite quickly, sucking the life out of anyone who bites into it. The trouble is that during her life, the girl ate hundreds of similar fruits given to her by her uncle. After reading the entry to the end, the girl could not move for a long time out of fear. She understood perfectly well that she was the cause of her mother's sudden, serious illness. However, no one else in this house ate them so often, which meant everything should work out. And yet, Mother was second in the number of fruits eaten. At her age, this is very dangerous. A weak body might not be able to withstand it, and only Chelsea will be to blame for her death. At this moment, the door of the room opens noisily and the maid reports tragic news. It's too late to wonder how much fruit the woman ate, because she died this morning. The maid adds that the Marquise's widowed mother died of an unknown disease. However, the cause of this disease is already known to the one who poisoned the elderly mother. Of course, she didn't do it on purpose, but does that matter? The Marquis demands that nothing be touched on the bookshelves of his late mother. She treasured books very much. From then on, the idea crept into my head to tell my husband everything, lifting a heavy stone from my soul. But every time the girl tried to speak, something stopped her from confessing. In the end, the sin remained unabsolved, and Chelsea blamed herself for what happened. Sometimes the husband noticed that his wife was constantly not telling him everything, turning her gaze away. Going downstairs, they are met by a maid who has prepared the things of the former mistress of the house. Among other things, 2 letters were found in her room, inside which were prepared wills. The girl is surprised to learn that her mother left a separate letter even for her before her death. In the letter, she thanks Chelsea for everything. Only with her did her mother feel truly alive. This time became a time of reverence for her, as if she had been her own daughter all her life. There was only one thing the Dowager Lady wanted to ask Chelsea. During her lifetime, she was unable to complete her main task, but the girl has every chance of succeeding. The greenhouse becomes her property, and now only Chelsea decides what it will become. The notebook Celia found on the first day contained the best methods for maintaining the greenhouse. Despite the tragic nature of the situation, Mother even bequeathed her favorite notebook. Only with this lifelong knowledge will Chelsea be able to take care of the spiritual herb. As she finishes reading the will, she is not as confident in herself as her mother once was. However, the only way to atone for her death is to fulfill her last request. Thus, Chelsea decides to start a new life, devoting herself entirely to the development of the greenhouse. Spiritual grass has beautiful flowers during the flowering period, but it is very finicky. Relying on the notebook, she tried her best to ensure that the spiritual grass flower bloomed on time. But despite Chelsea's efforts and hopes, this flower did not yield to her. In the end, the failure only increased her feelings of guilt, after which the girl decided to run away from home. After some time, she decides to look into the greenhouse again, seeing a blossoming flower. At that moment, a loud voice calls her name, seeing the girl from afar. Mr. Marquis was here, although he is usually busy with work matters at this time. Approaching him, she admits that she did not expect to see her husband here during the daytime. In response to this, the Marquis decides to ask why Chelsea hates him so much. She seemed to have forgotten how much he had given her, wanting to see his wife the happiest in the world. Perhaps she couldn't stand his strict attitude, so she simply cut him out of her life. If the whole thing is that her husband took off his wedding ring, she needs to know the truth. He had long ago ordered new wedding rings from the best craftsman, temporarily removing his old ring. Because of this trifle, she decided to commit a rash act, putting her family at risk. Moreover, if she decides to use her uncle's money, the Marquis promises not to object. The last words sounded especially offensive. My husband completely misunderstood everything. The divorce is not his fault. Only Chelsea is to blame for what happened. Having only managed to say a few words, she begins to fall to the floor, as if her legs have become weak. The girl's voice trembled violently from fear. The Marquis could not make out a single word. However, he does understand something, and this information comes as a strong blow. The wife's confessions concern her late mother. She knows much more than the Marquis himself. Without letting her finish, he admits that everyone knew about what happened for a long time and had long forgiven Chelsea. At first, he didn't understand what his mother's will, which she left in that letter, meant, but now he knows perfectly well the meaning of every word that was written by her hand. In this letter, the late mother reproached her son. He was still too far from the ideal husband. The Marquis was rude to Chelsea, but he should know that Chelsea was not to blame for what happened. If he had spoken to her about this letter earlier, she would not have been in such a desperate situation. When she ran away, he felt as if his soul had been torn out by the roots, so empty was it inside. And now, looking into her eyes, he wants to tell her once again that he loves Chelsea more than his own life. The Marquis did not lie about the wedding rings, which were ordered from the best craftsmen in the city. He no longer wants a contract marriage, which means they can live like a normal family. He wants to spend the rest of his life with Chelsea if she agrees to start over again. In response, the girl admits that she has long been addicted to this poison. The Marquis promises to cure his wife by any means necessary, even if it means going to the ends of the earth. It doesn't matter what herbs are used to cure the disease, but you can be sure that it will cope. The Marquis will not allow her to die because his life will end with hers. Perhaps if this conversation had taken place a little earlier, they would not have needed the detective's help. In any case, Celia played a far from insignificant role in their reunion. Suddenly, Chelsea realizes that the Marquis couldn't have found out about the poisoned fruit so easily. Someone had to tell him about this because the information was kept strictly confidential. Of course, Celia told about this, although the girl did not regret her decision one bit. Looking at these two, she is ready to do much more, if only they would never be separated. The Marquis reminds us that at such a moment it is not very pleasant to see a stranger. However, Celia was not here by chance. Chelsea has something very important to do. She cannot put off the main task for which she has come a long way. Still not understanding what they are talking about, the girl does not take her eyes off the cute stranger. The truth is that right now is the time to open the greenhouse. Now it is completely ready. It feels like Chelsea is facing its past to open the doors to the future. Finally, Celia will be able to visit the mysterious place to which her mother's notes are dedicated. She's almost certain that the remaining 2,000 in cash is behind that door. You can fall in love with a greenhouse at first sight, knowing there are 2,000 in cash inside. The girl asks not to delay with this. We need to quickly enter such a wonderful place. At the last second, Chelsea decides to stop. At the same moment, Celia's heart almost stopped. Doubts prevent you from lowering the handle, stepping over the threshold as if over yourself. It is precisely for such things that another strong hand is needed to grasp her fragile palm. The Marquis will go through this path with his wife, so it will be easier for her to make a difficult decision. Looking into his eyes, she clearly understands that he has become a different person. In turn, she must also be decisive, otherwise why was so much effort spent on the greenhouse? It's always much easier together. Perhaps this is why a person needs a strong family. There is only one question that has been bothering Celia for a long time. It's not entirely clear why the Dowager asked Chelsea to grow grass in her will. The spiritual grass plays a significant role in the novel's original plot, meaning Chelsea's story doesn't end in the greenhouse. By the way, money was spent on opening the last chapters, so we should open the door quickly. There was only one way left to find out everything and get back your honest 2,000 in cash. As soon as the curtains are pulled back, bright light instantly bursts into every corner of the room. This place is truly magical, a sight that cannot be seen while reading a novel. Everything Chelsea has spent so much time on is now revealed to her in its finished form. The greenhouse is thriving just as the Dowager Lady wished. It is impossible to describe in words the beauty that the heroes see right in front of them. If only Mother were with them, she could enjoy it too. The lady would be happy to see the greenhouse truly perfect. Chelsea once again blames herself for the thoughtless actions that led to her death. If everything had been different, Mother would have definitely lived to see this day and would have been happy. A girl needs to survive the tragedy to the end, which usually requires many years and family support. It's hard to think of anything else when you see a scene like this, but Celia remembers why she's here. The system still hasn't popped up with a new notification, even though it's entitled to a reward. If this is the ending of the episode, then the final chord should be 2,000 in cash. At that moment, a system notification popped up before my eyes, informing me that the spiritual grass was sprouting. She already understands how this news can be useful for the main character of the story. She asks young people to listen to her if they want to quickly solve their main problem. Celia found a way to help Chelsea overcome food poisoning even after eating hundreds of fruits. Every morning, healing dew forms on the spiritual grass, but only if it recognizes its owner. One drop of dew has healing properties and removes all toxins when consumed regularly. In other words, the Marquis does not need to look for healers at all, because the best medicine is here. The greenhouse has everything one needs, which is why Mother asked that it be protected in her will. She knew Chelsea was infected with poison, but she didn't want to see her die early. It was as if she knew that the day would come when healing flowers would sprout from the spiritual grass. At the end of the letter, Mother asked them to be happy and to walk hand in hand all their lives. She came to terms with her own death, realizing that her time was running out. But Chelsea has a long life ahead of her. Thanks to her mother's will, this becomes possible. Thus, the first task in the new role was completed successfully. One could not even dream of better. As a reward for her success, the system increases her rank by 1 level and unlocks some options. The ending was truly amazing, the best thing that could be written in a novel. Perhaps no one has ever seen such a thing with their own eyes, but Celia was incredibly lucky. She used to complain about her choice of novel, but now she's incredibly happy to be here. I'm curious to see what characters she'll meet on her next mission. There will probably be a dark-haired gentleman or something like that among them. At that moment, she remembers that one dark-haired boy is still waiting for her return. In his long service, the old coachman had never heard the order to depart so loudly. She is seriously worried about the young man, for whose life she herself took responsibility. When Celia looks into the office, she can't find Damon, even though the boy was told to stay inside. Perhaps, after a long wait, the boy decided that Celia had abandoned him. Even before leaving, she left a bag of money so that he would decide to return to his previous life. We just need to check if Damon took the money or if the bag is still there. She takes a moment to look around the office, making sure there is no one there. The good news is that the money is indeed there, which means the idea was a success. She has no doubt that having discovered the money, the young man simply took it and ran away from the office forever. However, there is also bad news, and that is that Celia hears someone's footsteps behind her. Turning around, she realizes that all her hopes have been shattered like a fragile crystal vase. But most importantly, Damon decided to try himself in a new role. He wasn't lying when he said he would do a good job as assistant director. Dressed as a maid, the boy carefully cleaned all the offices, neatly laying out the work folders. He explains that he is almost finished. All that remains is to wash the floor and move the things to the warehouse. Looking around, Celia doesn't recognize the dusty office where she worked for so long. He really did clean up every corner of the office, and now it's not embarrassing to meet clients here. It seems like the boy has a secret talent for cleaning, considering how sparkling clean everything is. Their old office is probably cleaner than a hospital ward. Without receiving even a few words of gratitude, Damon is sure he did something wrong. He tried to follow all the advice from the book that Celia recommended he read before she left. The boy thanks her for the opportunity to read a valuable book. It really helped him figure out how to clean up. In fact, she just wanted to keep him busy with something simple and was not hinting at cleaning at all. If Celia had found it a little earlier, she would have definitely thrown the book into the burning stove. Now Damon is seriously convinced that his desire to help only angered the young mistress. She tries to convince him otherwise. He simply could not harm her with a beautiful cleaning. However, if he disobeyed her order, this could be turned to his advantage. If she starts doubting him and treating him like a bad worker, it will make him leave. Celia reminds him that he only used the trash as an excuse to break the ban on going outside. She warned that she didn't like it when someone looked at her personal things and disposed of them as they pleased. It is quite difficult to withstand his gaze, which strikes right to the heart. No girl in her place could have kept up this circus for long. If he cleaned up the office that well, it would make up for all the other flaws. In any case, the boy did a great job, which means he deserves leniency. Seriously, if Celia suddenly starts acting crazy, Damon will think she's crazy. This boy is still just a child. It will take at least 5 years before he becomes a real hero. Besides, after some time she will be able to develop immunity to his cute face. There is plenty of time to get back on track. There is no point in saying goodbye to this young man so early. From that day on, Celia decides to look after the child a little, giving him a path to his future life. It is quite symbolic that after successfully completing the task, the weather outside changes dramatically. Instead of the dismal slush that greeted Celia on her first day, the sun now shines every day. For Damon, nothing changes. He continues to get into character. Over time, the boy began to better understand which tasks should be done first. True, his face gradually acquires new features, becoming more and more masculine. He is not yet the main character, but time brings him closer to that age. Even the boy's voice becomes more mature, beginning to break and roughen. While preparing dinner, he suddenly notices his director, who is a little late in waking up. Celia says good morning, hoping to be there in time for a hot, fresh breakfast. There's an awkward pause. Damon doesn't want to break the bad news. And yet, it's already lunchtime, so breakfast is a thing of the past. It was strange, because it seemed to her that it was early morning, and she had been too hasty in going out to the kitchen. To be honest, she really tried to wake up earlier, but it doesn't always work. Celia begins to notice some changes in the behavior of her young assistant. He had been silent before, but now his silence turned into close observation. The style of clothing no longer resembles the previous look at all. Damon began to take it more seriously. He himself seems not to be fully aware of the speed of his maturation, but continues to remain unperturbed. The young man reminds that after the last incident, the office roof needs to be repaired. The ceiling is leaking, which means that the next time it rains, they will have to take a shower without wanting to. The building itself is very old, although Celia should really remember that. She always thought that damaged roof boards could be easily replaced in a couple of hours. The idea of replacing the boards is quite good, considering that Celia knows a way to climb onto the roof. A stepladder won't help here, but Damon has his own idea. He suggests leaving the matter to him. The office roof needs urgent repairs. First of all, he intends to find a suitable book with repair instructions. This should speed up the process. If this continues, Damon will remain within the walls of her office forever. At this moment, Celia hears the system alert sound. She is tasked with getting close enough to the subject to make him feel uneasy. He must be disappointed in his savior. This is the only way to put everything in its place. Looking into the office, the girl asks about the book on roof repair that he promised to find. Instead, the young man found another book with a strange title. Perhaps it also contains useful information. Suddenly, Celia decides to reach for her book, as if not noticing that there is someone nearby. It felt like the young man was in her way and was slightly blocking the bookshelf. It's clear from his look that Damon is very uncomfortable. He's been messing around with a simple task for too long. I have to huddle in a small area of the office, although he could have moved aside. Once Celia has decided to succeed, she must go all the way and not be afraid of mistakes. At some point, they become so close that it seems as if the girl didn't want to look for any books at all. She can't take her eyes off his beautiful eyelashes, even though she had noticed before that they were long. At that moment, a bell rings at the entrance to the office. Someone has come to visit them for work. Seeing 2 employees in front of her, the girl asks to be introduced to Lady Celia from the detective agency. Instead of a work environment, the atmosphere of a private agency is a little unusual for such places. Quickly turning to the client, Celia apologizes for the delay. She is ready to accept it. The agency can easily find a runaway cat or arrange surveillance of an unfaithful husband. She promises that clients can rely on her for everything, and Damon knows this better than anyone. It must be said that the story of the new client is rather strange of all the stories. It is the most confusing. It all started that evening when the maid who came to the agency was making the final preparations. As she passed the owner of the estate's room, she suddenly heard loud voices. Previously, the owners did not act as if they had had a major quarrel or even a divorce. Eliza announces to her husband that she has long been sick of everything connected with this damn mansion. The girl can't even stand her own husband, and it's better to say so right now. Carl listens to all the reproaches in silence, not understanding what is behind the sudden change in his wife's mood. Some reproaches sound too offensive, the man can hardly contain himself. This is probably exactly what Eliza is trying to achieve, otherwise she wouldn't have touched on the most painful topics. If this is all the wife wanted to tell, the gentleman can only come to terms with the inevitable decision. He suggests breaking off the engagement before they become enemies. Hearing this, Nancy realizes that she has witnessed the final conversation, after which the divorce will happen. Recently, the maid decided to turn to a private detective so that he could find her ex-fiancé. A friend recommended Celia's agency, promising that it was the best private agency in the whole city. After listening to the client's story, Celia didn't immediately understand why she had sought help. Nancy has worked on the family's estate for many years and values her connection with them very much. The owner of the estate is Mr. Karl Laurent, a rather famous admiral of the Western Fleet. Karl is a very worthy man, respected for protecting the coast from sea monsters and pirates. He is rarely on land, his hard service does not allow him to spend too much time with his wife. Some time ago, Karl suddenly broke off his engagement to Lady Eliza, which became the talk of the town. Having received no instructions, the estate's maid decided to contact the detective herself, and here she is. After some thought, Celia suggests that after her ex-fiancé left the house, the jewelry might have disappeared. However, the valuables remained untouched, and no one suspects Eliza of theft. It's just that all the servants are very worried about her safety, and besides, Mr. Karl has become very unhappy. Eliza also did not want a breakup. This became clear that same night when the maid saw her face. Nancy crept quietly up to the door and was able to see the expression on her face. It did not look happy at all. Holding her husband's gift in her hands, Eliza seemed to be mentally saying goodbye to him forever. People usually behave differently when they carry out a plan. But the tears say otherwise. The girl clearly loved Admiral Karl. It was painful for her to part with him. Nancy is almost certain that the young lady is hiding some terrible secret. The gentleman worries about her in the same way, and only strange circumstances prevented Eliza from staying. The maid begs for help. She has nowhere else to turn for support except this place. Celia must find her mistress, otherwise the family's happy life will fall into ruin. It seemed that she had heard somewhere a similar story, which often appears in novels. It is simply impossible to refuse. Nancy Celia promises to do everything in her power. Having finished her story, the maid leaves the office, leaving its owner alone. Immediately after this, the system's voice announces the addition of a new book to the agency's library. It's likely going to be a challenge sorting through the missing bride's file, but you have to start somewhere. The hero's wife looks rather gloomy, as if she really is keeping some kind of secret. There is also good news, because the rich admiral will pay a nice bonus upon learning of the mission's completion. Once the order is completed, she will finally be able to repair the office roof with the money she earned. She might even be able to decorate it a little if she has some spare money left over after the renovation. At this moment, the guy appears next to me again. He always sneaks up quieter than a little mouse. Damon just wanted to put the kettle back in case the guest had already finished talking to Celia. Until she allows the table to be cleared, the young man will not dare touch the dishes. She had already gotten used to his intense gaze, but sometimes it was difficult to look away. Meanwhile, Damon's eyes remain motionless. Even his pupils don't change width. I have to break the silence myself, otherwise they will stare at each other until the morning. The book she was looking for had already been found. He had taken care of that long ago. It describes in detail the method of seducing a young man by one ignorant person. Judging by the title of the book, the boy guessed for sure that it did not concern the work of a detective agency. I wish I could fall through the ground. He would definitely misunderstand her intentions. The disgusting obsessed woman has now turned into an ignorant but equally obsessed one. Any normal person would run away from here with their heels flashing, but this guy prefers to endure. At that moment, Celia suddenly realizes that he could have read all the forbidden books. One day he himself thanked her for the books, saying that reading really helps one to develop. Right now, she is holding in her hands a book by the same author that Damon read 2 months ago. However, the initials seem too familiar, as if she had encountered the same signature before. There is another detail that directly indicates the connection between the facts. The same bouquet of flowers was sent by this stranger with very similar initials in the signature. You just need to find it to finally be sure that the version is correct. Damon doesn't change his style. He quietly appears somewhere behind time after time. Celia would be very grateful if he remembered the bouquet of flowers and the card that were recently lying in the office. Of course, he can reproach her for the fact that the girl is always losing her things. Instead, the young man directly asks who sent her these flowers 2 months ago. The postcard contained the sender's initials, which are of great value. The young man does not fully trust these words. He is sure that the problem lies with the sender himself. As expected, he insists that he has never seen a bouquet of flowers on his desk. The only place Celia asked not to be cleaned was her bedroom and study. If there is definitely no bouquet in the bedroom, it means it should be in the director's office. She might have put the flowers in the closet by mistake, which happens when you throw things around in a hurry. The problem is that the desk drawer won't open, and the bouquet is needed right now. With a final tug on the table handle, the drawer rolls out with a crunch. Along with the shelf, all the other things, neatly laid out by Damon, come out. He spent quite a long time cleaning the office, carefully putting each item in its place. It feels like the director of this office is getting ready to move by taking everything out of the shelves. However, the main task was completed. She finally found what she was looking for on the desktop. The bouquet is indeed here, although it didn't require breaking the furniture at all. The treasured bouquet of flowers is back in her hands, which is even nicer than receiving it from an admirer. It's a pity that the assistant's efforts went down the drain. I'll have to spend half a day cleaning up. All that remains is to check the version about the signature initials. The answers to all the questions are in the postcard. A second later, there are no questions left, just like Celia's doubts. She knows that such coincidences do not happen, because the signature belongs to one person. If a match occurs twice, it's worth double-checking, but in this case there are 3 such matches at once. She recalls her first meeting with a young couple who had lived their entire lives on the neighboring street. The man was sure that the house was empty, not even knowing about the private agency. However, after Lady Celia appeared here, the locals started talking about a certain detective. If you think about it, no one knew about her existence, which means such a character simply didn't exist. There is no one in this world who has actually known Celia for many years. Only the crazy author of all those books in the library truly knows her life story. If this is so, then what did she become when she started a new life in this world? Damon believes that she must know well the gentleman who sent her a bouquet of flowers. From this moment on, they will have to get even closer. Celia has found a new trail. She tells Damon that without his help, the agency will not be able to function properly. Flowers can be placed anywhere, and it would be better if the guy simply throws them away. They are no longer needed. Celia has already found everything she was looking for. The girl still knows nothing about the strange stranger who sends flowers and silly cards. Unlike her, this gentleman knows much more about her than one might imagine. Celia intends to focus on what she can do without putting things off. Many years have passed since the heroine of her new assignment lost her parents in a fire. Eliza had to live with scars. No one even dared to look at the unfortunate girl. And then one day she receives a letter with a marriage proposal from a military man. The poor fellow couldn't find a suitable match for himself, despite his efforts. It is known that this admiral was quite handsome and very talented. It's not so bad to live as a woman who no one cares about and just go with the flow. You might as well look into the eyes of the idiot who dared to make that suggestion. However, seeing a man with a bouquet of flowers in front of her, her opinion changed dramatically. He asks for forgiveness for being a little late, although something completely different is important to Eliza. The rumors about Admiral Carl's beauty are not at all exaggerated, but rather, in life he was even more handsome. The man was a little late due to work, but hopes that her decision has not changed. Sailors usually give mother-of-pearl bouquets of flowers only to those they want to protect for the rest of their lives. Celia replies that it is not worth trying so hard for her. These are just unnecessary formalities. She wants to know the truth, what the young man feels when he looks at her face. Carl probably understands that it is impossible to get rid of such deep scars from the fire. However, only now does the Admiral really notice this trifle. If Eliza hadn't mentioned the scars, he would never have noticed the flaws on the pretty girl's face. Rather, they remind Carl of the traces where waves have passed in the very center of the endless sea. With beautiful sea waves on her face, she seems even more beautiful. Never before had Eliza heard anything like this about the deep scars that had marred her entire life. This phrase dispelled the last doubts, and soon she accepted the marriage proposal. The girl began to visit the temple, praying for the health and safety of the Admiral during the service. In his absence, she decides to take over all the household chores. While everyone else ignored her, Carl's family treated Eliza very warmly. It was unusual at first, but she soon came to like the new role. Meetings with Carl were magical. Each such night turned into a separate chapter of the novel. The girl lost count of how many mother-of-pearl bouquets he gave her. Receiving a new bouquet of flowers, Eliza carefully placed it in a vase, remembering her Admiral. The love story lasted until one day the girl heard the sound of footsteps. This time the maid was not alone. A famous priest was in the room with her. His gaze did not promise anything good, and for a long time they looked at each other in silence. Stepping back a little, Eliza accidentally knocks over a vase of flowers from Admiral Carl. After their visit, life seems to be divided into before and after, like a white porcelain vase. Her happiness did not last long, leaving behind memories of her past love. The free chapters ended, but it was enough to bring the reader to tears. She can't skip the next chapter, otherwise she will never know the ending. A priest appeared in front of the broken vase, so it turns out that Celia now needs to go to the temple. However, first she decides to investigate the mansion, settling a couple of important issues. It's decided that tomorrow morning, first thing she will go to the mansion, and then visit the temple. Damon has time to understand this and intends to follow there. If Celia had taken an assistant with her, he could have helped with the investigation of the case. The girl may have gotten used to seeing him as just an office assistant, but now he's ready to open up. There are other talents besides cleaning that the young man can demonstrate in practice. Damon assures her of his usefulness. He needs at least one chance to prove it. However, this is a little strange, because before he had never asked to be the detective's partner. In one of the books, the guy read that any detective should always have a faithful partner. Having someone to watch your back makes dangerous work much safer. In many ways, he is right, but does their current relationship allow for this? Moreover, while completing the task, they may accidentally stumble upon those who kidnapped the boy. Realizing that the girl will be against it, he begins to blame himself and his ridiculous appearance for everything. In this case, he intends to take care to disguise his appearance. During the investigation, the guy promises to always be nearby without revealing his identity. He won't even look anyone in the eye or speak, remaining completely in the shadows. It's funny to imagine what the young man would look like in such a case, completely hidden from passers-by. Celia's obsession had once again borne fruit, only she wanted something a little different. Instead of getting rid of him, Damon gets closer every day. Finally, she agrees to take an assistant on the mission. She just needs to pack his things. The suitcase can hold all the essentials, and the girl won't have to carry it herself. That's why a detective needs a partner who will take on the hardest work. Now he is convinced that he has run far enough so that some food for the first time was packed for the road. That same day, the crew takes them to the estate, where they have a lot of work to do. Nancy is overjoyed at their arrival and was really looking forward to real detectives getting to work on the case. The light of her hope is as blinding as the gaze of this sweet maid. First, Celia wants to see the places that Mr. Carl and Eliza visited most often. Nancy apologizes, but before they go into the house, they need to take care of some things. Even before the detective has even started working, he is already being presented with conditions. However, the condition is quite feasible, although at first it is difficult to get used to the new image. By disguising themselves as servants, they will be able to enter the estate's rooms unnoticed without attracting attention. It's a pity, but the maid didn't have time to get permission from the owner of the estate to conduct an investigation. Eliza was very close to the maids, allowing them to visit any room. That's why Nancy insisted on a little masquerade with dressing up. It should be noted that Damon behaves just as calmly, as if everything is going on as usual. He doesn't understand why he should react differently to such a simple request. So, if we are to believe the maid's words, the owners often spent time in this room. After all, they were already engaged, which meant there would be other places in the house. Even in the luxurious mansion, Damon was able to find one dirty spot. There is dust on the glass, and yet Admiral Carl's servants receive a very substantial salary. From the very beginning, the guy noticed that the estate was not in the best condition. Apart from a little dust, the living room appears to be quite nice and has expensive furniture. If you think about it, a priest could also appear in this place and bring bad news to the house. First, you need to look around during the inspection. A new detail may emerge. Without wasting any time, Celia examines every corner of the house that is accessible to any maid. After 20 minutes of searching, she fails to find anything special. She decides to go further, not stopping at cabinets and bookshelves. In this form, Celia looks more like a servant who saw something sparkling below. It probably looks ridiculous now, but that's the real work of a private investigator. Damon believes that such a task should be entrusted to him. He is not afraid of getting his clothes dirty. The guy suggests leaving all the dirty work to him, and Celia should only deal with the investigation. In the end, a man is obliged to propose this, otherwise it will look wrong from the outside. When they held hands as they ran away from the harbor, the boy's hands did not seem as big as they did now. It's no big deal for him to get his hands a little dirty and dusty. Carefully slipping his hand under the chest of drawers, he suddenly discovers something unusual. All this time, things were hidden down below that should not fall into the wrong hands. Judging by the unbroken seal, the letter was not sent after it was written and folded into the envelope. Obviously, there was only one person in the house who could have written this letter. When Celia looked under the dresser, she couldn't find anything similar. The boy clearly has talent for more than just cleaning and carrying heavy luggage. If you remember, Celia's mother's things were always in the right places, unlike her daughter's things. Damon hopes that by finding the letter under the dresser, he was able to do her some good. Celia thanks her new partner from the bottom of her heart. She certainly wouldn't have been able to cope without his help. This is his first job as an assistant. Now he should continue in the same spirit. Having understood the hint, the guy decides to look around a little more, continuing his investigation. Meanwhile, Celia will have some time to study the letter, which will provide a clue to important facts. In her letter to her husband, Eliza writes many warm words, as if she feels his presence. The summer garden, where they often relaxed, became her favorite place for slow, solitary walks. During the walk, she does not forget about her husband for a second, which she honestly writes about in a love letter. Apparently, the letter was written shortly after Admiral Carl set sail. However, in the end, Eliza announces that she no longer sees any point in their protracted romance. It's funny that after such a stormy start to the relationship, she suddenly decides to break up with him. From her own experience, Celia knows that a breakup is always preceded by some event. She'll have to try really hard if she wants to solve this case and please the sweet maid Nancy. From the first day of the meeting, the matter seemed too complicated. Now everything is getting more complicated. The inspection of the house was soon completed, and the result was quite good. Celia asks the maid to come into the office. She will need a small favor. An important guest will soon arrive at this estate, so it is better to cover up the traces of the investigation. From time to time, Mr. Carl's friend brings monster cores here without sending the goods through servants. Damon had heard that there was a special reason for this, due to the residual magic in these cores. The cores themselves are very dangerous, so not everyone would want to carry them with them. The information is very valuable, but it is unclear where the newbie knows it from. It's worth taking a closer look at her partner's hidden talent. Seriously, there's something wrong here because Carl should be sick of monsters and these cannonballs. She wants to know who the strange gentleman is who personally delivers monster cores. Nancy assures that he is a charming gentleman with incredible and flawless skin. Every slightest movement of the gentleman is honed to the smallest detail. It will drive any girl crazy. There is no need to continue. Celia already understands that the maid is head over heels in love with Carl's friend. The detectives want to meet him if sweet Nancy agrees to help. There is no need to worry. Celia is not at all aiming for a charming gentleman with flawless skin. So they decide to stay a little longer at the estate for one important meeting. It becomes clear why Eliza spent most of her time in the estate's garden. Damon is convinced that other rooms on all floors of the house also need to be thoroughly examined. The young man offers new ideas, each time trying to demonstrate his usefulness. Perhaps the inspection of Admiral Carl's house reminded the boy of the harbor where he was kept locked up. Sometimes he can't understand what his young boss is even thinking about. That's why Damon is curious to know where she goes most often and what kind of things she does. He suddenly begins to think about what made the Admiral's missing bride cry and laugh. Judging by his thoughtful look, he spends too much time in his thoughts. Being an assistant detective is not such an easy job, especially when the detective is a woman. We didn't have to wait long. Soon the maid invited the detective into the house. The gentleman arrived a little earlier than usual. They will be able to see him right now. Celia asks the guy to stay here. He has already done quite a lot today. However, he does not intend to take a break. He himself volunteered to help the girl with the investigation. In fact, Celia is simply giving him an opportunity to escape, although he does not understand the hint. She decides to explain it differently. After all, that was the plan. It's not that Celia doesn't trust his experience or doubts his partner's reliability. However, after meeting the young man, that nobleman may want to take him back to the harbor. The very thought of it makes Celia horrified. She will not be able to forgive herself for this mistake. Therefore, you need to sit quietly on the bench while she settles the issue with the gentleman. After all the persuasion, he finally agrees, asking not to stay too long. Finally, Celia wishes him a good rest, hoping that he will make the right decision. For some reason, it seems to her that the boy will definitely run away from the garden after all of Celia's stupid antics. The meeting with that gentleman requires special attention. The maid's story raises serious suspicions. If he really does bring the monster cores himself, then who is this stranger? However, today she will find out about this. The young gentleman is already entering the gates of the estate. As expected, the large luggage was always with him, and that is where the cores are located. The main news for Celia will be the fact that this same gentleman has already met her at the harbor. All that remains is to wait a little while until the maid Nancy brings this gentleman into the living room. The maids are not allowed into the office, so Celia should wait here. She assures that he always communicates politely with the maids and does not care at all about status. Right now, she is playing the role of a servant and she needs to live up to the image. Immediately after Nancy's maid leaves, she notices a notification window. There's $20,000 in cash to be made in the estate's main office if she can get in there. It would be a real crime to miss out on such a sum. It's worth taking a small risk. The door is located right along the corridor. You just need to quickly run through there. After all, she works as a detective and is obliged to know all the information. If Celia gets scared and turns back, she risks missing something very important. No one will be upset if she just looks around the office before the guest shows up for the meeting. Just a couple of minutes later, she steps over the threshold of the office. The disorder here reminds her of an office, as if she had never left her home walls. However, she can't compare with this dirty woman. Admiral Carl cares even less about cleanliness. Damon thinks that there is no pig bigger than Celia, but he is mistaken. Come to think of it, when the boy runs away, she will have to clean up the mess in the room herself. Realizing that she has been constantly thinking about the wrong thing, Celia quickly comes to her senses. In the distance, she sees Mr. Carl's closet, in which jars are neatly arranged. It is inside these jars that the unknown gentleman brings monster cores to the estate. In this world, they say that the mana cores are like gas that can explode upon contact. Besides the cores, there must be something else that directly or indirectly points to the hint. It is strange, because if this marriage had been political from the very beginning, Charles could have done without an engagement proposal. On the top shelf is the Admiral's diary. It probably contains valuable entries. It would be better if, with the help of the diary, she could understand the emotions of its owner. In the very first lines, Carl writes about how he first met Eliza at a big ball. It turns out that Carl was well acquainted with her even before the engagement. So why was Eliza surprised by his appearance? That night there was a luxurious ball, attended by only the most famous people. The last operation at sea added glory to his name. Carl managed to catch a huge deep-sea monster, for which he was awarded an honorary order. As a result, he heads to the ball, since the adjutant has long insisted on finding a wife. Almost every day the Admiral finds himself on the front lines and is not always sure that he will return alive. Most likely, no girl would want to have such a husband. In the midst of the ball, he suddenly hears women's voices, similar to a quarrel between two noble persons. At first, it is difficult to understand that they are rivals, but soon everything becomes obvious. Miss Aurora admits that she only wanted to praise the girl for her efforts to shine in public. She apologizes if it hurt her that much. Carl sees scars on Eliza's face for the first time, although he has met this person before. Aurora continues to insist that it was very brave of her to show up at the ball without covering her scars. That's why no one can take their eyes off her, because a girl with a scar stands out from the crowd. After hearing the hurtful words, she suddenly thanks the girl for the compliments. She doesn't have the same ability to attract attention to herself as Miss Aurora does. In response to her advice, Eliza advises her to change her outfit, otherwise Aurora risks going unnoticed. Only village girls who don't know anything about fashion wear dresses like this. Perhaps Miss Aurora has no qualities that would attract people's attention. Whispers of guests can be heard in the crowd, but Carl listens more and more to the conversation. He is curious to know what other compliments this girl with a scar is capable of. Since then, he often sought out meetings with Eliza. She was truly different from the others. She held herself confidently in any situation, even when she had to take risks. If the Admiral had known about her a little earlier, he would certainly have proposed to her. It would be better if after the ball he could get to know her, promising to meet more often. As usual, Eliza stood all alone. She was not popular with men. This is even better for a man who has served at sea all his life. After taking a few more steps through the lively crowd, he suddenly notices another gentleman. The young man got ahead of him by asking the girl to dance one dance with him. He insists that Eliza's presence makes this humble place brighter than the stars in the sky. She had never heard such compliments before. This gentleman was too intrusive. There is an awkward pause between them that is always difficult to break. If the girl is not ready to dance now, he promises to approach her a little later. Finally, she admits that it would be better for the gentleman to take a break and rest from the bustle of the ball. Taking the hint, he quickly walks away, accidentally bumping into Admiral Carl in the crowd. A little more and he would have gotten some backlash for that push in the shoulder, but today he needs to be calm. Even when saying goodbye to Eliza, Miss Aurora throws out a few comments about her appearance. In response, Eliza advises her to find herself a blind husband who will not see her face at all. These words sounded too rude. Even Aurora did not allow herself to do something like that. Eliza can continue the squabble with words if someone doesn't have enough mutual reproaches. A second later, Aurora interrupts the argument by spilling all the wine on her rival's dress. She is sure that no one can love such an evil person as Eliza. Seeing this scene, Carl wanted to cast aside all doubts and just run out to meet them. At that moment, he realizes that the argument is not over yet. The girl admits that she is not looking for a partner here at all. She only needs a rich investor. It is better to be as abrupt as Eliza than to remain an unbearable, rude woman like Aurora. Immediately after this, the girl goes into the garden, not noticing the Admiral behind her. For a long time, he watches silently from afar. Something stops the man from getting to know him better. The girl slowly lowers her palm into the water, not wanting to see her reflection. The face is reflected much better if you leave streaks and hide ugly scars. Only she knows how difficult it is to bear this burden and how painful it is to receive reproaches from people. It was at that moment that Carl realized that sooner or later he would propose to Eliza. Returning to the estate, he is unable to resume his normal work for a long time. Perhaps Carl had never seen such sad eyes in his life. They were filled with pain. Meanwhile, Eliza seemed very strong to him, as if an inner core was preventing her from falling. She prefers to experience grief alone, so that no one sees these tears. Noticing the thoughtfulness on the Admiral's face, the assistant wants to understand what is going on. Surely the gentleman has already found the young lady whom he recently met at the ball. In response to this, Carl admits that he plans to send her an engagement proposal. Finally, this eternal bachelor will bring a woman into the house. It's high time for him to start a family. He himself did not believe that this day would come, but that girl was able to attract the gentleman with something. Suddenly, the assistant realizes that they are talking about Eliza Reeve, whose rumors have long since spread throughout the city. Even if someone considers this a joke, the decision has been made and Carl intends to stay on track. All this time, he never stops thinking about this girl for a single day. Only Eliza occupies his thoughts. My heart hurts even more when I see her tears. She really needs a strong shoulder. There is only one explanation as to why Carl desires her happiness so strongly. There is only one reason why he wants to make her smile and always be near her. He wants to hug her fragile shoulders, to make her feel strong support and care. The Admiral wants to end her eternal whirlpool of suffering by giving her a direct path to a happy life. At this point, the last line breaks off, and various fragments of daily entries follow. Celia was tired of shedding tears by the time she finished reading this romantic story. Now she understands why Sir Charles asked Eliza for an engagement in a secret letter. It must be said that the Admiral writes quite well, although he is not a writer at all. His diary is as interesting as if she were holding an ordinary novel in her hands. But everything has an end, and the blank page at the end of the notebook proves it perfectly. It turns out that even the main male characters aren't particularly fond of keeping personal diaries. Perhaps there are other clues here that will help to better unravel the story. She hasn't looked at the top shelf yet, but for that she'd need a high stepladder. However, there is someone in the office who can help you get by without it. A second later, someone's hand was tightly gripped by hers, and judging by the strength, it was a man's. He admits that the girl almost reached it herself, which is very commendable. But a maid shouldn't be in the master of the estate's office, should she? Besides, her face says otherwise. Keschel had met this cute creature somewhere. He is almost sure that he sees in front of him a private detective who decided to dress up as a maid. There is no doubt that it was this young gentleman whom Celia met on deck during the boy's rescue, and now he looks sweetly into her eyes, as if he had never done anything illegal. It's hard to understand how he was able to spot her so quickly, recognizing her facial features. That night on the ship, Keschel saw her for only a second, during which time it is impossible to remember her appearance. It turned out that the maid herself told him about Celia, revealing the truth about the detective in disguise. It must be hard for her to go through this right now, but Keschel doesn't intend to be rude. On the contrary, he introduces himself by name, specifying that he belongs to the famous Orlovsky Count. In response, Celia admits that some time ago she decided to open her own search agency. Deciding to quickly change the subject, she starts talking about a large suitcase, which was quite convenient. This suitcase can compactly fit a lot of useful things in one place. However, the talk about a big suitcase reminds me of the boy in the wooden box. Carl has long been running a modest business, trading in some parts of slain monsters. Most people get very scared when they see something like this. However, the same cannot be said about Celia, because the girl still behaves extremely calmly. You mustn't reveal your identity, otherwise there will be shocking news in the next issue of the newspaper. An unnamed private detective is found dead, mauled by a hungry shark. The press will start discussing whether it was an accident or a tragedy staged by someone. In any case, Damon is in the house. He will not allow the worst to happen. Just recently she asked the boy to run away, but now she has abruptly changed her mind. Keschel is curious about what kind of investigation the stranger is conducting in this estate. Only now does he realize that she is carrying out an order from his friend. The guy thinks that she won't be able to complete the task of bringing the runaway bride back. However, he can provide the necessary information, so you can contact him with any question. He speaks about it as if he is subtly pushing his assistance in the investigation. Opening the suitcase, Keschel asks not to worry about anything, because everything inside is dead. The guy cut out all the body parts with his own hands in case there was any mana left inside them. The most important part of the monster that he brought back poses no threat. Right now, she can observe the process of mana remaining in the monster's core leaking out. If there is a risk of danger, it is so small that it happens once every 10 years. Rather, one may receive a signal that reminds one of the presence of a special entity. Monsters typically use underwater signals to quickly transmit messages. Celia decides to find out more about this because Carl can use this rare property of the core. That's why he carefully collects the kernels that the young man brings every weekend. Keschel can answer any questions if the detective is interested in some details. If there are none, it is his turn to ask questions, because there are quite a lot of them. Having said these words, he turns towards Celia without saying another word. It can be assumed that he had long ago begun to guess where exactly he met the girl for the first time. Her long blonde hair and height further incline Keschel to the same version. That stranger on the ship also knew how to move quite well. She was clearly prepared for battle. At the same time, she was smart enough that the guy considered her an informant. Looking into her eyes again, he is ready to talk openly, without hiding behind masks. However, first she should answer what the detective does while completing tasks. Mostly, she's just looking for people, although Celia doesn't understand what the question was about. The thing is that she doesn't deal with catching fugitives and other criminal activities. Rather, such things are done by bounty hunters who take mortal risks for the sake of profit. However, she may work with traders who sell dangerous, prohibited goods. Keschel's final suggestion is a ridiculous version of helping lonely old people. Having stopped the flow of different versions, the girl declares that they are her potential clients. It's strange that out of all the proposed versions, she chooses the most absurd one. In fact, whether they are criminals, traders, or old people, they can all be very dear to someone. For Celia, it doesn't matter who the person is. What matters is how much he wants his loved one back. The return of someone important to her throughout her life inspires her to work as a detective. Then Keschel asks to think about it, because everyone has something that they really want to get back. But what to do if there is a person in the family who is of no use to anyone? A man born with a fate that neither his relatives nor he himself can bear. Someone whose very existence is highly undesirable, so it is easier to get rid of the person. Someone so rejected that even those who wanted to kill him eventually gave in and left. The question is whether she will be able to find such a person if she receives such an order. When it comes to a person who is of no use to anyone in this world, only one comes to mind. The boy Celia pulled out of the locked box is most likely such a person. Keschel knows everything about Damon's past, which is why he insists on saying these words. However, in response, the girl assures that she has never met such a person in her life. The people she finds are always the ones their loved ones are looking for. That is why they make a request to find a person by turning to a private agency. All this time she tried to speak as casually as possible, wanting to hide her identity. Now it remains to be seen whether Celia managed to hide her connection with that abandoned boy. Her answer makes you think, because the words from the detective's point of view sounded quite convincing. Of course, she entered the forbidden area of the mansion, but she did it with noble intentions. Looking at him intently, Celia still tries to guess this gentleman's thoughts. Suddenly, he apologizes for asking stupid questions. It was impolite to the girl. The system immediately announces the successful completion of the mission, activating the effect of compassionate indifference. Every time Keschel is interested in her, a song will play in her head, erasing memories. With the system on her side, Celia wouldn't have to worry about the young man's grievances. In a way, this little interrogation was even a little funny. According to Keschel, she has every chance of becoming the most successful detective. It turns out that after everything that happened, he decided to shower Celia with compliments. But the way the guy said it could have been handled better. It turned out that he was seriously convinced that her name was Leah, having confused her with another similar girl. Next time, he suggests chatting over a cup of tea without being distracted by extraneous matters. They will be able to continue the conversation they started, bringing it to a logical conclusion. There are other secrets that a girl may well be hiding behind her lovely lips. Celia might have expected anything but this strange gesture. Keschel suggests staying in touch, giving him a business card with full information about himself as a parting gift. If she wants to get in touch, she can easily find him in the city using these contacts. There is no doubt that the need for the next meeting will definitely arise. For some reason, he is sure that Celia herself will look for him when she needs urgent help. At this point, the difficult test for the girl was over. She had passed the test of strength with dignity. If this gentleman had come in a little later, the meeting would never have taken place. Even now, standing in the same place, she feels his presence in Mr. Carl's office. Keschel really didn't leave the office, as if he hadn't managed to finish the most important thing. And yet, his gaze remains unchanged. He is confident of a quick meeting with a beautiful stranger. 10 minutes later, Celia leaves the walls of the estate, finally feeling free. Her shoulders were so tense with stress, it was as if she had been unloading train cars for 2 hours straight. Looking back one last time, she hopes that the conversation with Keschel will bear fruit. In romantic fantasy, the protagonist is often described as an abandoned, forgotten child. A romance with such a hero is impossible to dismiss, but she got to see the plot with her own eyes. As she approached the place where she had passed Damon, she suddenly realized something. For a long time, Celia tried to get rid of the young man, and it seems that today she finally succeeded. Incredibly, he actually left, despite being told not to leave the bench. Her plan worked. Damon found it too hard to work as an assistant to a negligent director. Saying goodbye to the boy, she wishes him to find his love and experience true human happiness. So, a few seconds of freedom are over. It's time for Celia to return to reality. No one was going to leave her alone, but every word that was said was heard by Damon. Looking her straight in the eyes, he asks her to explain what the words about happiness and freedom from it mean. If he understood correctly, Celia had planned to get rid of him and only then left him on the bench. There's no doubt the guy heard every word, and the plan fell through the cracks. Naturally, she begins to convince him that she was talking about another person. Moreover, noticing his absence, the girl did not even try to walk through the garden. She was sure that he had gone ahead, and that was the only reason she didn't start looking for him right away. A little more, and she would have found the boy herself, although he could have shouted from afar. Such excuses do not inspire confidence. She needs to act much more decisively. Instead of apologizing, she suddenly begins to reproach her assistant, who left his work post. Celia did not allow the assistant to leave the place. He was obliged to keep an eye on the estate from the street. In other words, he could jeopardize their mission, and then the failure would fall on his shoulders. This girl is probably capable of playing with words and convincingly saying complete nonsense. After some thought, Damon reminds her that she was the one who left her post first. The guy just decided to take a little walk and, besides, urgently needed to change his clothes. He wanted to see the local sights, such as the giant fish. Celia should close this topic quickly, otherwise she might accidentally let slip about her meeting with Keschel. She is glad that everything ended well and he did not go too far. You just need to be more careful next time and warn the director about leaving. He promises to follow her advice because Celia would never advise anything bad. She is the only person in the whole world who showed genuine concern for him. Finally, Damon promises to never lose her again, and if he does lose her, he will find her that same day. It's hard to tell from his tone whether he's speaking literally or trying to say something more. He's too tense, as if something had turned upside down in Damon's mind in the past couple of hours. Very soon he will become truly obsessed with the main male character of his story. In the meantime, there is time to watch how the boy gradually becomes a man. After a short time, they approach the gate, next to which a carriage has been waiting for them for a long time. It's time to remember the promise Celia made before leaving for home. The girl asked to wait patiently for her on the bench, otherwise there would be even more problems with the task. Celia promised to pamper her assistant a little if he followed the instructions. Before leaving the estate, she decides to once again explore the territory of this strange place. In the original plot, the Admiral was waiting for a new hero who could put an end to the long war. It seems that this is exactly what Eliza was talking about with the High Priest when he came to the house. There is only one place that connects the novel's protagonist and the High Priest. This thought had occurred to Celia before, but now she needed to find out everything thoroughly. The task can be entrusted to a young man in the end. He will be pleased to prove himself. When they return, he will have to submit an official request to visit the temple. It is only necessary to say that the visit is connected with the search for Lady Eliza Reeve. This way, Celia will free up some space in her schedule for something else. Before visiting the temple and talking with the High Priest, she will have time to read the original. She was right. Damon really did start acting differently after that mission. It's as if he is re-examining himself, finding changes in everything. This young man had always had a thoughtful look, but now it had become firmer and more determined. Meanwhile, Celia's wallet became fatter because successfully completing a task always adds money. Returning to the original plot, for a long time the young couple were perfectly happy. Eliza often spent her evenings in the living room, waiting for her husband until late at night. At times, Admiral Carl liked to joke a little, and sometimes it can be useful. Suddenly sneaking up from behind, he hugs his unsuspecting wife. Eliza didn't even hear his footsteps as her husband crept up from the front door. She missed him very much and would not sleep without her loved one. While he was gone, she managed to replace all the flowers in the house and helped the servants clean the rooms. But instead of words, I just want to kiss these lovely cheeks. Perhaps they will find a more suitable place to continue their pleasant conversation. A few minutes later, the bedroom window was already wide open. Eliza decides to remind him that she wanted to clean her husband's office, but it was too dangerous there because of the monster cores. She is curious to know why Carl is collecting something so life-threatening. In response, he tells a story that recently happened right in the center of the sea. Recently, something strange started happening there after the most powerful monster awakened. At the sight of the monster, the Admiral felt a very unusual and familiar feeling. At first he thought he was imagining things, but then he decided to collect the fragments in case of a mass attack. It sounds ridiculous, but he is almost certain that there was another creature inside that monster. When a war drags on, all sorts of unexpected things can happen, so you have to be on your guard. However, she has nothing to worry about. Carl will not allow any monster to enter here. He will hold Eliza tightly to himself, shielding her from the monster with his body. If the hero had been able to appear at such a time, Carl would not have been so worried. They say that the hero is the chosen one of the goddess and will appear on the seashore. After listening to her husband's story, the image of the hero becomes more reminiscent of the Holy Virgin. More than 100 years have passed since the prophecy, and the temple no longer received any omens. Realizing that he has confused her a little, Carl asks her to get it out of her head. But even such strange conversations seem much more interesting. They make Eliza truly happy. It's best to return to them as often as possible. With the whole night ahead of them, these two have a lot of interesting topics to discuss. And yet one single thought still won't leave my head. If Eliza prays hard enough, can she bring the heroes coming closer? That same night, the priest saw for the first time what was spoken of in the sacred scriptures. The novice asks the high priest to look at this. The light is caused by a divine manifestation. After so many years, they finally saw the divine revelation of the goddess. With the coming of the goddess, a hero capable of stopping the war must appear on Earth. It's strange, but it's at this very moment that the system notifies you of a new cash replenishment point. The point is located in the temple where she must go as part of the quest. Celia's been a bit tired lately, but there should be another clue in the temple. Perhaps this has something to do with the prophecy of the hero's return. If you think about it, this hero could be Carl, who himself broke off his engagement with Eliza. In that case, Eliza's words about being very tired make no sense. It seemed like they were truly having a happy time together, and they certainly wouldn't get tired of that. Celia lost count of how many versions she had tried without finding out the truth. First, we need to explore the temple to make the picture clearer. She hopes she won't have to wait too long for approval to visit the temple. With these thoughts, the girl slowly falls asleep. She needs to get some sleep. Otherwise, the next day will be even more difficult than today. Suddenly, she hears the sound of approaching footsteps from the door. If it is Damon, Celia decides to wait a while, pretending to be asleep. Immediately after this, something quite heavy, similar to a bag, fell to the floor. She still doesn't open her eyes, hoping that the skillful disguise will work as intended. The young man looks at her in complete silence, as if he is about to commit an act. He often advised her to go to bed on time, and besides, Celia fell asleep in the wrong place again. After all, that's what the bedroom is for, and sleeping on the sofa in the living room is too uncomfortable. However, she is free to do as she sees fit. He understands that she spends a lot of time reading, which is why she falls asleep so quickly. Damon is definitely not the kind of person who would dare disturb her sound sleep. If it were possible, he would look at that lovely, sleepy face for an eternity. But now Damon will only cover her with a blanket, carefully covering her body. All this time, Celia hears his whispers less and less, and she really begins to fall asleep. The longer she pretends to be asleep, the more she just wants to fall asleep. At some point, she realizes that she can't hear anything. All sounds seem to have completely died down. The next morning, Celia wakes up earlier than usual, greeting the rays of the bright sun. Damon was right. Sleeping on the couch is too uncomfortable, especially in the morning. Quickly remembering last night, she suddenly realizes that she accidentally fell asleep in the presence of a guy. However, it is unclear why he showed up at such a late hour and what he really wanted to say. Some of the phrases he whispered before going to bed are still remembered. He had been acting very strange ever since the day they visited Carl's estate. The young man kept asking her if she wanted to leave him in this estate. He also looked at her with such a look as if he was ready to burn a hole in her face. What I remember most was that last look in which strong changes were noticeable. Perhaps in his eyes, Celia began to seem like an intrusive family, and all the changes are connected with this. At this very moment, the first large-scale update of the system is taking place. Now Celia can find answers to questions that were previously inaccessible. After running the system update, she realizes that this is something more serious than just an improvement. The main question was what to do with a person who, for some reason, did not want to run away. The system responds that if a person becomes an object of attention, then this is completely normal. However, if he starts to behave too intrusively, this violates the boundaries of what is permissible. Everything is determined by consistency. This is the main difference in relationships between people. Even someone who initially enjoyed feeling loved can gradually change. Eventually, people get tired of being suffocated by obsessive feelings. But in Damon's case, she may well act like a real obsessive maniac. That's all. The session for answering any questions has ended, as a reboot is required. If the system had lured her here for just this, it was even more cunning than Celia thought. Seriously, she's already proven herself to be an obsessive person. There's no point in acting any differently. There's nothing to be done. I'll have to continue playing my usual role. If someone decides to see a real obsession, he will soon get it in full. This looks quite convincing, but the working day has long since begun. Turning around, she sees Damon again, only this time he has nothing to add to her words. Some people want to see Celia right now. It's worth taking a break from their obsession for a while. To do this, she needs to go out into the reception area for a short while, where a new guest is waiting. Still not understanding the meaning of what was said, the girl timidly opens the door to the guest room. The young man who came to the office was well known to her from the book. She asks to explain what business could have forced them to come to a private agency. The church novice is pleased to announce that the request to visit the temple has been reviewed and accepted by the senior minister. In other words, she can go there right now, accompanied by novices. After reading the report of Lady Eliza's disappearance, the high priest took control of it. The high priest personally insisted that they deliver the girl to the temple in his carriage. For successfully arriving at the temple, the system adds 1,000 cash to Celia's balance. If you work here for a little while, you can read several novels. But the main thing is that she will see the main attraction with her own eyes. The statue of the goddess of the sea greets visitors to the temple in the very center of the huge square. This temple was built in her honor. The priests believe that this goddess is the patroness of sailors. The goddess holds in her hands the mystical light of guidance, blessing with it everything that is in the sea. It can penetrate into the deepest depths of the earth, allowing anyone who seeks to find their way. It can be said that the statue is the main symbol and pride of this sacred place. It felt like she and Damon were on a tour of an ancient temple. It is important to understand whether the novice can create this guiding light on his own. It turned out that mere mortals only use imitations made with the help of spiritual light. If the girl agrees to a small donation, she will receive a similar product. The items on the table are rather clumsily made, but it is clear that the craftsman worked on them sincerely. The novice offers her an amulet that can protect her from a storm or a shipwreck. The system advises you to buy this amulet. This item may become the key to the solution. In that case, all that remains is to pray that the amulet does not cost too much money. Since she was summoned to the temple by the high priest, the novice will not take money from her. Looking at the young man, he suddenly offers to give the amulet to the one who is with her right now. There is nothing special about a small gift, and besides, the item can really come in handy. However, if he doesn't help, Celia is quite capable of protecting her assistant herself. She talks about it as if she still thinks of Damon as a little boy. It's a little embarrassing to admit, but he is capable of defending himself. Perhaps this was the first time the guy decided to joke around with her a little. He did it on purpose, knowing full well how Celia would react to such jokes. Just a few hours ago they were in the office, sitting opposite each other. At that moment, Celia suggested that he lie down next to her and sleep if he was very tired. She would be interested to see his sleeping face. It must be very funny. Instead of answering, he suddenly turns away, although he had never done that before. A victorious smile flashed across Celia's face. She had achieved her small goal. Only now did she realize that Damon was simply holding back his laughter and not holding a grudge at all. It turns out that for a long time she had misunderstood his every move. Every glance of this young man conceals something different from what Celia is used to seeing in him. Damon asks her not to worry. He trusts her as much as he trusts himself. His expression changed again, as if he was always just hiding his true thoughts. The novice is forced to distract the young people. It is time for them to go to the inner chapel. On the way, Celia goes over in her head the latest episodes connected with this mysterious young man. Perhaps the novice knows some special signs that the new hero has. If word spreads of a new hero's appointment, the temple could gain a huge following. Unfortunately, he cannot tell everything. The high priest has forbidden this. By the way, he is already waiting for the guests of the temple, since the service has long since ended. The strange thing is that in the original story, a new hero should have appeared by this time. But now they are only meeting with the high priest, which means they are delaying the plot a little. Meriden welcomes both guests. He has long wished to see them in God's abode. In response, the girl thanks him for the warm welcome, asking him to forgive her for being late. Everything is the will of the goddess. The priest believes that everything in the world always happens exactly at the appointed time. However, the news of Lady Eliza's disappearance came as a real surprise to all the servants. This is exactly why they came. Celia hopes to find at least some kind of clue. Surely they know how much time has passed since the girl went missing. Celia is sure that no more than a week has passed, considering when she received this search assignment. In that case, the high priest hopes that there is still a chance to find the unfortunate girl. Listening to the priest, Celia gradually comes to the understanding that he knows much more. At this point, she decides to talk about the main news of the temple, hoping to hear something. It is known that quite recently, a prophecy about the coming of a new hero into the world was revealed to the temple. She found it a little strange that the temple itself preferred to remain silent about this fact. There's no point in asking how Celia found out about this. She always had plenty of reliable sources. While investigating Lady Eliza's case, she learned that the girl and Sir Carl secretly dreamed of becoming heroes. From what she heard, the priest had met with her before Eliza's disappearance. Is he hiding the prophecy about the new hero just because it is connected to the missing persons case? The high priest cannot find an answer to this, but his silence reveals the truth. After all, a hero is not some kind of warrior. He must be a completely different character. Rather, heroes are saints who sacrifice themselves to save others. It seems more like a sacrifice than an act of gaining glory. After a long silence, the high priest admits that Lady Eliza left after learning the truth. It's hard to believe, but she became the person Celia was just talking about. Realizing that she was beginning to guess everything, the priest only confirmed her thoughts. The ministers have no doubt what direction Eliza chose after leaving the temple walls. The monster that her husband once saw also ended up in those waters for a reason. Her fate was different from the very beginning, very different from everyone else's. In other words, the goddess chooses a girl named Eliza Larenth as the new hero. Perhaps it was to this moment that life led her day after day, guiding her along the right path. Eliza became the only survivor of the terrible fire that happened in her parents' house. While still at the estate, the girl often spoke about the strange dreams that visited her every night. She dreamed that someone was calling Eliza from the island, urging her to swim towards the rocky shores. The maid decided that in this way the goddess could fulfill her secret desire. I would like to believe that this is the case, but the gods must be sending signals in some other way. Seeing the high priest in the window, she again remembers the words of the maid Nancy, who may be right. However, the high priest's visit does not seem like a good omen to her at all. The first minutes of the conversation were a little strange. The priest was silent for a long time. Finally, he apologized for the late visit, but the matter could not be delayed. Lately, the sea monsters have become more ferocious, but the defenders managed to hold them back. Thanks to people like Eliza and her husband, the city's residents can sleep soundly. Having said these words, the high priest again falls into silence, as if waiting for a word from the mistress of the house. If he wants to talk about something, she asks him not to worry. She is ready to accept any information. Since he decided to visit her at such a late hour, she decided that the matter was really serious. You don't have to be embarrassed to talk about it out loud, even if the information is directly related to your husband. Hearing these last words, the high priest suddenly realizes that she has an idea. In fact, the speech concerns only her and what is Eliza's main purpose. Just recently, the temple's ministers received a prophecy about a new hero who will stop the war. After these words, she begins to guess how the priest's news will end. Finally, the girl hears the name of the new hero, realizing that the goddess has chosen her. None of the temple's ministers expected such a choice, so the news remains secret. Eliza Larenth becomes the next chosen one and will soon fulfill her destiny. After the conversation, the girl spends a long time trying to come to her senses, thinking about what she heard. It is difficult to imagine what is going on in her soul after the truth is revealed to her. Now it becomes clear why she has the same dream every night. If she really is a hero, then she is quite capable of helping Carl fight the monsters. Each time the Empire faces a monster invasion, the goddess chooses a new protector of humanity. For Eliza, choosing the goddess becomes the only chance to truly help her husband. With the help of divine power, she can end the war and save Carl from possible death. However, first she must personally visit the temple and be completely sure of everything. But the main thing is that she will have to break up with him forever, forcing her husband to stop loving her. When Eliza leaves the walls of her home, her husband must erase her from his life forever. After this, the girl declared her hatred for everything connected with this estate. At the end of the conversation, she admits that she has long been sick of her own husband. If he wants to say something, it's better to do it right now, in a sincere conversation with her. The admiral could not believe his ears when he heard such a confession from his beloved woman for the first time. He was the first to suggest breaking off the engagement if Eliza no longer loved him. In addition, she admits that she is fed up with his constant absence and long waits. A hero who protects the whole world cannot waste time for the sake of one person. Finally, Carl asks to stay for a while and answer his ex-husband's last question. When the war ends, they will be able to resume their relationship, returning it to its previous course. In response, she suggests that they simply greet each other. That's all he can hope for. After breaking off her engagement with Sir Carl, Lady Eliza immediately arrived at the Temple of the Sea Goddess. The girl knew her future fate very well, going to the island and sacrificing herself. The priest refused to take this side. The temple no longer wants to participate in this inhumane matter. He thought she would give in, but in the end the girl simply disappeared, heading to the island alone. At this moment, the doors of the hall open noisily. Someone knew about this meeting in advance. It's hard to understand how he ended up here, but Admiral Carl really does burst in on them. Celia quickly explains that she is a private detective and is acting at the request of the maid Nancy. To her surprise, instead of a simple answer, he continued walking deeper into the room, not paying attention to the guests. Carl announces that he intends to find Eliza right now. There is no time for useless talk. He advises against following him, otherwise Celia will have to experience his dark side firsthand. Such a warning is understandable to anyone, although one look inspires horror no less than his threats. Damon is still nearby, which makes meeting with Mr. Carl a little easier. Even if the Admiral shows his worst side, Damon always has something to say in response. From an early age, he was forced to fight for his existence every day and had long since become accustomed to fights. The priest begs the gentleman to stop. He must not put his life in danger. He warns that the high priest will also come under fire if he does not allow passage. However, even if he manages to reach the island, he will not be able to get out alive. He knows full well that Death Island never releases its captives. Carl is sure that this is no longer important now. The main thing is whether he can bring Eliza home. The girl is clearly not herself. She will be stuck on the island forever if she is not brought to her senses in time. Everything that happens is the fault of one person, and Carl considers himself to be this person. The Admiral was confident that after the end of the war they would be able to meet in their home. He didn't care if he looked pathetic in Eliza's eyes when he suggested they stay in touch. He just wanted to look at his wife one more time. Perhaps this was the last time he would see his wife. Gradually, Celia begins to understand that all this time Carl was waiting for Eliza to come back. He believed that the temple ministers would be able to dissuade her, but they were unable to prevent her from sailing to the island. At this moment, someone quietly asks the girl to pay attention to this. The letter they found under the dresser may shed some light. Damon took the envelope after examining the living room, confident of its usefulness. Looking again at the letter, Celia recalls Eliza's lines dedicated to Admiral Carl. There is no doubt that she loved her husband very much and staged the quarrel on purpose. She didn't want to put his life in danger, knowing that Carl would follow her. It felt like while reading the letter, the warmth of my beloved wife was still hovering in the room. There is just one strange detail, because in fact, Carl's eyes are not at all like the waves in color. Celia decides to confess that during their inspection of the estate, they discovered something strange. They found many things that indicated the presence of a man who was waiting for his beloved. It seemed to her that all these things were left by Eliza, but the only one who was waiting was Carl himself. Handing him the letter, she bluntly states that only the Admiral could have written this letter. He thought that his bride would return as soon as the long war finally came to an end. He silently takes the envelope in his hands. Right now, he has nothing to say in response to the detective's words. He needs to be told why Eliza made this decision and what her husband is obliged to do. The girl continues to convince him that Eliza does not at all resemble a reckless girl. She's not the type to just sacrifice herself over a ridiculous omen. Perhaps now, after all the information has been revealed, he will be able to understand the true reason. The truth is that the problem is with Carl himself, who voluntarily took on the burden of fighting the monsters. For this reason, he headed out into the endless sea, and Eliza followed his example, going after her husband. She deeply respected and loved him precisely because the Admiral fought against a threat to the entire world. She must have always dreamed of becoming a heroine in Carl's eyes, and not just a housewife in a mansion. This was the reason why she immediately headed to sea after learning about the prophecy. It's not often that you hear the truth like this, when someone says it straight to your face. He admits that he only wanted to see her nearby, without exposing Eliza to worries and dangers. It would have been enough to simply provide my wife with a comfortable life, but circumstances changed. Their conversation was never completed when Carl's young assistant burst into the room. Monsters are spotted again on the west coast. He asks the Admiral to leave immediately. All sea vessels are already directed in that direction, but this time the problem is much more serious. Eliza would not want to abandon people in trouble just to save her own life. So he must do what he is used to, remaining the man she fell in love with. While Carl defends the Empire from monsters, Celia promises to find his missing wife. After all, that's part of a private investigator's job, isn't it? The Admiral wants to give up everything and go in search of Eliza, but duty does not allow him to do so. That is why he asks the girl to do what Celia tried to assure him of. Carl will owe her his life if she searches Eliza and returns her back to her home port. The man speaks of this as if he now completely trusts Celia's words. Well, this is a good start to a new investigation, only she won't have to hide anymore. As long as the Admiral reliably covers the rear, she will do what she came here for. Carl promised to help if Celia needed quick travel between the two banks. In addition, the High Priest is ready to tell everything about the island where the sacrifices take place. Of course, Damon didn't stay on the sidelines, although his help wasn't needed yet. Death Island is located near dark waters, so getting to this place is not difficult. They say that the source of all sea monsters is located somewhere in the middle of that island. The currents created by the mana field around the banks flow so strongly that it is impossible to approach them. If an ordinary person accidentally approaches the shore, the seething mana will tear him to shreds. Simply put, space and time around the island are severely distorted, which will hinder Celia. The closer it gets to the center of the mana, the more the vibrations will begin to change. For example, during this time 3 months may pass on land, but only 1 day will pass on the island. If Eliza is in such a place right now, she needs to be brought back immediately. If she knew how to get to the island, it would be much easier to complete the task. The High Priest has no idea how the girl managed to get to the Island of Death on her own. Only someone who is well acquainted with the sea and who is not at all afraid of protective mana could carry it out. It is possible that she could have met this man from time to time at the Laurent estate. It must surely be a villain who will not stand in the way of the hero before the sacrifice. Also, the villain must have reasons why he spent so long preparing Eliza for death. At this moment, one guess comes to mind, which puts everything in its place. Only Keschel perfectly fits the description of the villain who persuaded the girl to make a difficult decision. If she was right, it wasn't a coincidence that he brought monster cores to her husband's mansion. By his instigation, this man tied a heavy anchor to the girl's legs. Unlike her, Detective Celia is completely free and ready to ruin his plan. The problem is that after all the work that had piled up, she was really very tired. Due to the fault of one crazy villain, she was faced with another dangerous journey. Still, it is necessary to save Eliza, and only then begin searching for and imprisoning the criminal Keschel. Damon is probably already sleeping in his usual place in the attic right now. Celia had a hard time leaving him in the agency office, as the matter was connected with her former owner. At that moment, she hears the voice of a young man who had no intention of going to bed at all. All this time he was here, continuing to read books from the shelf one after another. Celia can't understand why he hasn't gone upstairs yet. He admits that he really wanted to see Celia when she returned to the office. It's very sweet of him, but the girl didn't ask for anything like that. Looking at him, it is unclear whether the boy wants to go to bed or, as usual, is thinking about something important. Lately he's been thinking too much, and it's starting to seriously bother her. Sitting down next to her, Damon advises her not to take on so much work, otherwise it won't last long. However, the case of the missing wife will have to be brought to an end. It will affect the agency's reputation. Next time, Celia won't be able to take him with her, so the guy will have to stay in the office again. The news wasn't very pleasant, because Damon had already proven his worth. He hopes that after completing the task, Celia will not linger at the scene of the investigation. In this case, he is ready to wait until late at night, if necessary. The last confession was a bit unnecessary at his age. He needed to go to bed as early as possible. Suddenly, her eye catches a book she had completely forgotten about. The boy was able to find this lost book, giving Celia a little surprise. The girl didn't ask him about this at all, but it seems that he is becoming more independent every day. At the same time, in Admiral Carl's mansion, the owner sits by the window for a long time. In his mind, he seems to be next to her, hoping that the detective will be able to get his wife back. Damon will also be able to provide support, although Celia has forbidden him to leave the office. However, too much has changed in their relationship. Damon is no longer the frightened boy in the harbor. He has long since become the kind of person who is used to solving problems without relying on others. Even his gaze changed, as if he could look into the very depths of human souls. Looking back at him, Celia realizes that he has been waiting for her return for a long time. She had already become unaccustomed to the warm feeling when you realize that someone is waiting for you at home. After being reborn in a new world, it is Damon who becomes that person for Celia. They have been living together for 2 months now, and it seems they have long since gotten used to it, but today an unfamiliar feeling is growing in their souls. It's hard to admit this to herself, so the girl tries to push the thoughts away. She needs to come to her senses quickly, because soon Damon will have to leave her forever. From this moment on, Celia asks not to wait for her after work and to go straight to her room. Damon apologizes for refusing, but he won't be able to fulfill the request. He has no choice but to wait patiently for her return. However, he then stops abruptly, without revealing the meaning of these words. Getting up from the table, he asks the girl to have a good rest. She has a lot of work to do tomorrow. Tonight you need to sleep comfortably instead of falling asleep in the living room with a book in your hands. The next morning, Celia woke up with the same thought she had gone to bed with the previous night. It felt like the evening with Damon continued, although the young man knows how to keep it under wraps. Celia remembers that he smiled as he said goodbye, which almost never happened. Perhaps she just dreamed yesterday's smile, although she remembers every detail of the conversation. At that moment, a sound is heard near the window, as if a heavy object was thrown at the glass. The windows overlook a busy street. This kind of thing shouldn't happen here. Moving a little closer towards the windows, Celia sees a strange picture in front of her. The bird knocks its beak on the glass so hard, as if the office window was somehow in its way. If she continues this business, she will have to repair the windows along with the roof. Quickly lifting the window frame, she sees a carrier pigeon with a note tied to its leg. Celia didn't expect mail, especially not in such an unusual way. Meanwhile, the pigeon calmly looks at the office owner without moving its beak to the side. It looks like someone decided to play a joke on them, although it's still worth reading the contents of the note. This method of sending letters often appears on the pages of her favorite novels. It is also used in various detective films when they receive secret information. She always wanted to try it herself, but for some reason the dove refuses to give her paw. Instead, the feathered guest's paw is sent straight into her face, as if the girl had offended him in some way. She had definitely never encountered such a plot twist. Pigeons usually didn't behave this way. Celia suggests throwing him back out on the street. Fighting is prohibited in her office. Suddenly she realizes that she might have slightly confused the dove with another bird. If you look closely, instead of a homing pigeon, you can see a common parrot. At this moment, the parrot actually reports that a carriage has already been sent to the petty thief. Still not understanding what this cocky bird is talking about, Celia begins to suspect something. If the bird was sent here by Keschel, he could have chosen another way to send the message. Meanwhile, the parrot continues to pronounce memorized phrases about some 3 seconds of waiting. Exactly 1 second later, a countdown begins to sound from its beak. A moment later, the parrot announces that the waiting time is over and the carriage is already waiting for her at the door. And indeed, as soon as the countdown was over, Celia noticed an expensive carriage in front of the office. She was provided with the best stallions so that she could quickly reach her destination. It is clear that such a neat coachman could only serve in one of the richest estates. The only question is who started this game with the talking parrot and who is organizing this whole circus. Celia always burns with rage when jokers start to get on her nerves in earnest. If you think about it, a carriage is never sent without warning. It is considered bad form. Only someone who is alien to the rules of good behavior could act like this. Moreover, the parrot is also not known for its manners, accidentally saying a few dirty words. Suddenly, the bird says the name of its owner, which is exactly what Celia thought of at the very beginning. Taking flight, he calls her a thief again, conveying a message from Mr. Keschel. Only now does Damon realize that this is the man with whom he has an appointment today. The boy seems to know his name, although Celia doesn't know all the details of that vile kidnapping. Judging by Damon's reaction, he knows perfectly well who decided to kidnap him and why. He assures that nothing good should be expected from this meeting with the bandit. They can easily do without this person's help, completing the order without any problems. After all, if she decides not to cancel the meeting, Damon can provide support. Suddenly, the young man asks to believe that he is much better than this guy. The strange thing is that his words are completely irrelevant to the matter at hand and have nothing to do with work at all. For some time, I had to silently look at the downcast face of the young man who had said too much. He actually meant a meeting that was not related to the agency's work. In other words, the boy is seriously convinced that Celia is going to meet her lover. Looking at the crew that was brought to the agency's office, Damon is even more convinced of this. If that's all he wanted to say, the girl should be on her way for an important conversation. Finally, he asks her to stop. This is also very important for Celia. A moment later, she sees in his hand a medallion that will help her in the most difficult moment. One could say that it will be her personal talisman, protecting the girl from trouble. Before leaving the office, Celia must promise that nothing will happen to her. It's not really appropriate to ask such creepy questions before leaving the house. But he is not going to let go of his hand until he hears a convincing answer. In the end, she has to answer with the standard phrase that everything will be fine. The phrase sounds rather ridiculous, but she has nothing else to say to Damon other than these words. Finally, Celia asks not to worry about anything. She will return immediately after meeting with Keschel. This man's name does not inspire confidence. He knows his dark side like no one else. And yet, the medallion will help her in the moment when danger creeps too close. Damon silently watches the girl go, carefully examining the carriage. At that moment, Celia was overcome by a strange feeling that she had never experienced before. This feeling is difficult to explain in words, but it cannot be confused with anything else. She feels like she's seeing the boy for the last time, and Damon knows it right now. Perhaps this is why he so persistently dissuaded Celia from meeting with Mr. Keschel. It took her less than an hour to reach her destination. She didn't want to get involved with this man at all, but he wouldn't leave her without finishing the previous conversation. The Count has been waiting for her on deck for a long time, well aware of how important this conversation is. He welcomes the girl aboard his ship, thanking her for her visit. Keschel asks to avoid formalities, given that this is not exactly a working meeting. It's hard to tell what he meant by these words, but it's best to keep within the bounds of decency. He decides to start with something simple, stating that he read Celia's letter yesterday. It said that the girl wanted to meet him in person to discuss Eliza's disappearance. Surely he really does know much more about Lady Eliza's strange decision. Celia wants to know the truth, whether he took the unfortunate girl to the island for sacrifice. The guy claims that he simply couldn't refuse her when Eliza started begging for it. She went there less than a week ago, which means there is still some time left to search. Before the sacrificial rite, the hero is on the island, making preparations. Because of the magic, time flows much more slowly, so nothing serious has happened yet. If she intends to get the girl back, Keschel will be happy to help Detective Celia. We'll have to join forces with him and go to the island of sacrifice together. It is worth remembering that if the main task fails, she will remain on the island forever. To complete the order, Celia has no choice but to agree to the condition. Even if you don't have the opportunity to return home if things go badly, you need to pull yourself together and just take action. Finally, she agrees to cooperate, but it needs to be done as soon as possible. Since a new urgent mission for the system has appeared, it turns out there is a real chance to save it. Perhaps this brave girl is a true professional in her field. Since Keschel is also involved in this tragedy, he is simply obliged to participate in the rescue. The Count agrees to take her to the island of death, after which his conscience will be completely clear. Even though time flows differently on the island itself, they shouldn't hesitate, otherwise problems will arise. Today is the perfect weather to set off on a long and rather exciting voyage. By the way, she is quite lucky. Keschel would not agree to help another detective. Today is a beautiful sunny day. On such a day you could even die somewhere in the middle of the sea. Seriously, the sea gates weren't closed yet, which meant Eliza was alive. There is only one chance to bring her home, although it is unknown how the meeting on the island will end. If Celia has decided to go all the way, there is no point in stopping at the threshold. She intends to head straight to the island, but she has no intention of becoming its victim. In addition, we need to get another girl out of there, who became a victim due to a stupid mistake. As Keschel promised, they set sail that same day, without wasting precious minutes. The only lie was that the weather at sea would be just perfect all day. However, if the Count meant ideal weather for death, he hit the nail on the head. Without thinking about anything bad, he silently watches the storm, being close to the edge of the deck. His damned parrot is having fun watching Celia, because birds are not afraid of shipwrecks. But if he continues to chirp all sorts of nasty things, he definitely won't have time to fly away. Keschel asks not to be offended by the parrot. This bird does not understand what he is talking about. At this point, the storm begins to intensify and the sea becomes truly dangerous. It wasn't the best idea to go to sea in such weather, but the girl relied on the captain's experience. He assures that this is the best option when it is possible to go in search of Lady Eliza. Even Keschel, with his vast experience, would not have been able to approach the island in clear weather. Only when a storm rages does the flow of mana around the island calm down and weaken a little. For someone without any abilities, Celia holds herself up quite well, which is worthy of respect. After carefully examining the girl, he suddenly decides that she had prepared for the storm in advance. He was right about one thing: the storm at sea was raging really hard. This is enough to turn a ship upside down if they encounter oncoming waves. Almost falling after a strong push, she is caught by strong arms. Celia should remember her promise to Damon that this meeting was just for work. They are so close to each other, it seems like a new romance is brewing after completing the task. And yet, Keschel's guess turned out to be correct. She really is ready for a strong storm. Having felt the energy of the amulet, the Count admits that she is quite a clever thief. Right now, she's been accused of stealing, and the damn talking parrot confirms it. Quickly rummaging through her bag, she feels the object with her hand. The amulet that Damon gave for the journey emits a strange, magical glow. Keschel advises keeping this a secret. The amulet will be more useful than any protective magic. Immediately after this, he loudly announces that the ship is approaching the shore of Death Island. Right in front of her, Celia sees that mysterious place that she had previously only read about in books. Having launched the boat, he asks to continue the journey to the island alone. As they agreed, Keschel will lead the girl through the place that is protected by protective mana. There's no need to worry. He's quite confident that Celia will return safe and sound. You just need to take a step towards your destiny and remember that the magic amulet protects it. However, the Count will be in the nearby waters and wait for her return. Finding herself very close, Celia felt as if in her heart she felt the person she was destined to meet. The boat safely reaches the sandy shore. Fortunately, Count Keschel did not deceive. She actually ends up on Death Island, although Death is in no hurry to take her away. As a reward for getting to the island, the system awards her 2,000 in cash. The difficulty level of this place is so high, it's as if she's on her last mission. You have to be careful. There are hidden dangers lurking everywhere here. Even the sand underfoot seems too unstable, as if reminding us of the level of danger. Moving forward a little, she wants to hug the bag inside which the amulet is hidden tighter to her body. The pressure of the protective mana makes it difficult to breathe. It can be felt by every cell. They say that there is a great distortion of time and space going on here, so there is not a minute to lose. At that moment, she hears a strange voice that is talking to someone else. It can be easily seen how mana is able to distort space, leaving black holes. Looking into one of these holes, she suddenly sees characters that Eliza met in the past. It is likely that during her stay on the island, the poor thing constantly witnessed terrible scenes. However, some scenes were not so terrible you want to stay in such episodes of your life forever. It must be said that in a stormy sea, everyone is the same and everyone wants to return home. But this girl decided to stay here, unable to turn away from all these people. It becomes clear that the voice that sounds on the island is persuading Eliza to become a victim of the ritual. He calls her to him, assuring her that she has no right to endanger the fate of her loved ones. Only in this way can she fulfill her destiny as the chosen one of the goddess of the sea. In the next flashback, Celia sees her with Keschel during their secret meeting. He refuses to take the girl to the island because she is his friend's lover. Even the guiding light continues to flicker in the darkness, no matter how dim it may be. In response, she asks to suggest another way, if one even exists. Her husband went into battle with fear every time, but still continued to believe in himself. To stay close to such a person, she tried to match him. And then, one day, she heard this voice calling her to the island of sacrifice. That moment became decisive for her, because now Eliza too would be able to protect people from monsters. Even if she is not completely sure, she is obliged to make sure of everything herself, because it was her husband who taught her to look death straight in the face. She is sure that only this turns an ordinary person into a real hero. Now it remains to be seen what Eliza heard in response from Count Keschel. These are the words that are the most important in the episode from past memories. However, the episode quickly changes to another, where the husband tells the story of his last encounter with the monster. That night, Carl saw a strange emotion in the monster's eyes, similar to a human one. The pressure on the island is getting even stronger, making it difficult to think normally. Only after Celia hugs the bag to her chest does the pain throughout her body gradually subside. She begins to feel as if someone very close is warmly and tenderly wrapping her in his arms. The feeling reminds her of something from the past that she had long forgotten. At that moment, right in front of her, the girl sees the monster that Admiral Carl once met. She managed to find on the island the creature next to which Eliza should be. And indeed, Lady Eliza stands motionless in front of the monster, as if forgetting her fear. At the last moment, Celia manages to stop her, preventing her from becoming food for the monster. Turning around, the girl cannot understand how another person was able to get onto the island. However, there is no time for talking. Celia demands to follow her towards the other bank. She wants to reach Eliza's mind, reminding her of her husband, who is waiting for her return. Admiral Carl loves her more than life and will never agree to be left completely alone. At least for the sake of this man, she is obliged to get out from under the control of the voice that ordered her to become a victim. It seems to have worked. Eliza's gaze returns to normal. Looking around, she seemed to be looking again at the place where the strange voice had led her. If she really has come to, we need to get to the shore as soon as possible. The problem is that the sea monster has no intention of letting them go. If the system wants to see an exciting battle with a monster, this is a bad idea. Eliza asks to tell who the stranger really is and who sent her to the island. She came here at the request of Mr. Carl and is a professional private detective. If this is enough of an explanation, Celia demands to follow her immediately. It's strange, but her expression changes again. Maybe she shouldn't have mentioned her husband's name. This man gave up everything for his wife, so how did he manage to anger her? The mana pressure starts to rise again, making breathing more difficult. If this continues, something bad will definitely happen in this place. We need to get Eliza out as soon as possible, while she's still able to think normally. She again suggests to Eliza that she get out of here, otherwise the pressure will become unbearable. However, the girl asks her to calm down. Detective Celia has already done too much for her. Since the rift on Death Island was opened, only she has the power to close it back. In other words, now she won't be able to leave here without fulfilling the hero's main purpose. She must know that this place is not meant for exit. The island does not let go of the victim. One can only enter here by becoming the very hero that the goddess of the sea appointed her to be. The gate will close if someone enters it by sacrificing themselves. This is precisely the duty of the chosen hero, otherwise Lady Eliza would not be here. She believes in the prophecy and must go to the end, since this is what her life path has become. A person does not choose his own destiny. Everything has long been predetermined by the heavenly gods. It only takes one small sacrifice to bring light into this world, and Eliza is quite ready to be that sacrifice. By appearing with this light in her hand, she will be able to convey the will of the goddess of the sea to the sea monsters. Finally, Celia asks him to come to his senses because monsters are breaking out of the underwater rift right now. This could mean that the rift was not meant to be entered at all, and her sacrifice would be in vain. For some reason, she is sure that monsters are also victims, and in this they are very similar. A magical wave forcefully drove the monsters out of the rift after it suddenly opened. The hero's purpose is to enter the rift and close it for many decades. Even looking at the hungry sea beast, she is sure that this is God's will and this is her destiny. Only after this will peace and order return to the whole world, even if not for very long. If one sacrifice can bring freedom to all humanity, Eliza is ready to fulfill that role. However, does Sir Carl really want her sacrifice, and who told Eliza all this nonsense? Celia knows for sure that her husband will never be able to be happy after learning about the death of his beloved. All he ever wanted was to be with her, living this life together until old age. If human destinies are so dear to her, the girl asks to remember the fate of her closest person. Lady Eliza knows very well what he is feeling now. She often thought about her husband. He fights with dignity in the very center of the sea, never forgetting for a second for whom he is doing it. Once the Admiral even promised to leave the sea and just be next to her on a quiet shore. But now Eliza understands his choice when she herself finds herself in the place of the defender of humanity. She can't turn away and remain inactive after the rift on the island opened. As long as there is a way to save Carl, she will do everything to keep him alive. Listening to this girl, Celia begins to understand how much this heroine has changed. She learned to consider others by becoming a true hero and sacrificing her own life. And yet, it's time to stop this, otherwise Celia will never be able to return her back to her husband. Perhaps there is a way to make a choice that will ultimately leave everyone alive. Suddenly the girl notices one curious detail connected with the amulet. If you look closely, the amulet and the monster's eyes reflect the same light, as if there is a connection between them. Also, those red eyes look exactly like the monster cores. There is no doubt that the Count brought to the mansion in his jars precisely the eyes of monsters, and not the cores at all. If this is true, why did Keschel so diligently carry out such a strange task? There is another oddity that Celia did not pay attention to at the very beginning. Eliza said that the guiding light was the very divine will that monsters understood. Does this mean that with the help of the guiding light she can communicate directly with monsters? In this way, it is possible to avoid the development of the previous scenario by replacing it with a new one. It is not entirely clear why the goddess granted the hero such a strange way of communication. There must be some special message here that just needs to be conveyed to the monsters. The answer is probably among the clues they have managed to collect. It is only necessary to reconstruct a detailed picture of what Celia saw during her visit to the island. That strange voice whispered that in the raging sea, all creatures are the same. In the monster's eyes, Carl noticed something that is usually inherent in any person. The sudden opening of an underwater rift caused an explosion of mana, forcing the monsters out. After putting all the facts and details together, Celia finally realized something very important. Turning to Eliza, she asks to listen to her one last time before doing something irreparable. The one the underwater rift is calling to itself is not her at all, since the goddess wants another victim. If a girl were to go into the abyss right now and sacrifice herself, it wouldn't change anything. She doesn't have to participate in the ritual at all, because she will simply be eaten by the monsters. She herself said that the monsters were captured only as a result of an accidental mana explosion. At least that's what Sir Carl said, and Eliza has no reason not to trust him. Everyone who goes to sea wants to survive and return home as soon as possible, right? It's hard to argue with that, especially since Eliza really does remember those words. In that case, she must believe that the same thing happened to the monsters from the rift. They too wandered the depths of the sea in search of a home and a family. This is the answer to the main question of why the monster's gaze seemed strange to Carl. In the monster's eyes, he caught a familiar emotion, one that he himself often experienced during his service. It was a strong desire to return home after a long and dangerous service at sea. It turns out that this is how a portal opened between the world of monsters and people, which Eliza calls a rift. Since they did not know the exact location, they were unable to return home. All that happened in the sea were new explosions of mana from the lost monsters that collided with people. After listening to Celia, the girl cannot answer a word for a long time, realizing the truth of these words. The monsters that are one step away from her are just as lagging behind their relatives. There is no doubt that this is true, because this is the only way all the details fit together to form the overall picture. There is no aggression in the monster, only fatigue and longing for home. He was simply desperately searching for his home and those comrades who had recently been nearby. The core where the mana is concentrated is their weak point, but the monster still keeps it open. Initially, they had no reason to harm people, so they did not close their cores. They must be returned to their native place, only then will the underwater rift close forever. There is only one person who can do this better than anyone in this world. Celia believes that Lady Eliza has the necessary power to close the portal. According to her words, the light is a messenger of the goddess and is able to establish contact with the monster. But its goal is not at all to expel or exterminate sea monsters. This guiding light shows the monsters the right direction, illuminating the path all the way home. If they follow him, the underwater rift will naturally close. Perhaps this is precisely the purpose of the hero, and not sacrifice at all. With this divine light, she will benefit not only people but also other living beings. Celia asks not to worry, because she has already come a long way alone. There was one last thing left to do, because the flickering itself was the language of the sea monsters. It's time to stop seeing ourselves as victims who can only bring peace through our own death. With the help of the light that it creates, one only needs to convey a message to the monsters. By showing them the direction where the house is, they will immediately head there. Monsters do resemble people in many ways, but for now, it is better for them to live separately. It is important to stop this unnecessary war, which has already dragged on for too long. Finally, Lady Eliza decides to try it. There is no turning back. As a true hero, she must make the right decisions, because a hero's goal is always one. Celia also did a good job. She managed to do what no one else could. Now she will be able to return this unfortunate girl to her native estate and her husband. The main thing is that she doesn't change her mind at the last moment, otherwise the chance will be lost forever. For a long time, the monster watches them closely from the sea. He really does have a special look. They say that the guiding light can dwell in everything that is above the sea, so you can simply direct him to follow the sea waves and let him show you the right path. Only in this way will the monsters be able to return without losing their way in the vast sea. This assignment becomes more than just an order from a private agency. It's as if he reminds Celia of what she has forgotten due to the constant fuss. The amulet could only be given to her by someone who valued her life more than his own. That man is Damon, and he made her promise to return home safe and sound. It seems the story with Lady Eliza has taught her a lot. Now she just needs to finish the job. At the same time, Admiral Carl continues to serve at sea, fighting monsters. He orders all units to take up battle positions. Now is the time to fire a good volley. You need to stay away from the monsters, avoiding collisions with these huge individuals. Carl seems to understand that this naval battle could end with the death of all personnel. He remembers Celia's promise. She announced Lady Eliza's imminent return to the estate. Something must have happened on the trip to the island, since there has been no news from them yet. The Admiral is almost certain that his bride will refuse to return. It has always been difficult to convince her. In this case, he must ensure that his grandchildren are not ashamed of their ancestors. Carl intends to fight a brutal battle, as if these minutes were the last in his life. If he dies, then the reason why Eliza sacrifices herself will disappear in the next second. The guns have long been in combat positions. The ship's crew awaits the order of its captain. Carl decides not to delay this. It's time for the monsters to get away from the peaceful shores. He inspires the team to fight. The boys are probably bored and want to stretch their muscles a bit. Surprisingly, even the last minutes do not allow one to forget the image of his beloved. Carl continues to miss her as much as possible. At this moment, he suddenly notices strange changes occurring on the sea surface. It's hard to believe, but what Eliza warned about is happening before his eyes. As if on command, the sea monsters retreat back to the bottom, not wanting to start a fight. The sailors were sure that the sea battle with the monsters would take many lives of their comrades to the bottom. Instead, the giant monster tells its kin to retreat. It also does not intend to lose them. Hearing his command, the remaining individuals stop a few meters from the ship. Without a doubt, only Eliza's help can explain the miracle happening right now. A few more minutes later, the sunlight blinds the sky and the transparent surface of the sea. At the same moment, both girls remain on the shore of Death Island, having fulfilled their main purpose. Having escaped through an underwater rift from the battle site, they found themselves on the shore of the island. Right now, Celia meets those unfortunate creatures who have long lost their native place. By her participation, she helped the monsters avoid suffering, while also saving the life of Lady Eliza. By the way, the giant monster that was here all this time is also grateful to her. True, the appearance of the monster is a little alarming, although it is absolutely safe for girls. He kept his eyes closed for a long time, so he didn't seem so scary. At that moment, she hears the voice of a man who truly has something to be grateful for. Celia saved her life because just a minute ago, Eliza was ready to give up everything. It's hard to talk about, but she was quite capable of stepping into the abyss to meet the sea monster. It was thanks to this detective that she came to the realization that her actions would not change anything. Previously, Eliza was convinced that by sacrificing herself, she could save innocent lives. As soon as they return back, she will definitely invite Mr. Carl and the Count to the wedding celebration. However, if they are serious about celebrating the holiday, they should hurry. The underwater rift will close any minute, leaving both girls stranded on the island forever. If this happens, they will have to spend the rest of their days with the monsters. Without wasting any time, she grabs Celia by the hand, ordering her to run towards the shore. There is no time for long explanations. You just need to leave this place as quickly as possible. Closing the rift will lead to an even greater distortion of space, and no one will be able to help them. The girls simply won't survive if they get washed away by the sea wave after closing. Luckily, the shore is very close, and the boat should also remain in the same place. After a while, they quickly climb onto the boat. There is a little time to get away from the island. Looking ahead, Celia immediately stops regretting her recent meeting with Count Keschel. He arrived here on a rescue ship as he promised during his last conversation with Celia. The shark flag on the ship makes it clear that Keschel is at the helm. However, at the very last moment, Celia realizes that he is a little late. Due to the high mana pressure, the waves rage even more violently than before. One hit from the wave was enough to knock Detective Celia out of the boat. Eliza still tries to offer her a hand, but the girl is thrown too far to the side. In such weather, she definitely won't be able to get out, and the rescue ship is quite far away. Once underwater, Celia already understands how this task will end for her. Suddenly, she notices how the amulet given to her by Damon seems to float out of her bag on its own. He floats past her at a moment when there is definitely no other help available. Trying to reach the amulet, the girl stretches her hand forward with all her might. A second later, she manages to grab the magical item, just as the Count described it. She can already feel how her body is gradually starting to weaken after being underwater for a long time. The good news is that Eliza managed to escape, and her fate is now in the hands of God alone. Now Carl and Eliza can find their happiness again. They deserve it in full. If she had such a person, ready to sacrifice himself, she would be happy too. One could say that Celia's words were heard by someone above, but in fact, that was not the case. The man who promised to appear in difficult times is accustomed to the real difficulties of life. It is on his chest that the girl gradually regains consciousness, spitting out seawater. This is no longer a joke. A second ago, she was on the other side of life. But Celia promised him that she would return immediately after talking with that mysterious gentleman. Damon has something to reproach her for. He no longer wants to see Celia drowning in the sea. Her first life was quite difficult. It's something you want to erase from your memory forever. As a child, little Celia asked her teacher to stay, promising to behave well. It was a pity, but the woman seemed not to hear her words, continuing to walk forward. This becomes the first disappointment that makes her look at life in a new way. She advises waiting for another teacher, hoping that he will agree to teach the child. Every teacher said the same words and then simply left her. For a long time, she tried to understand how she was different from other children and why no one wanted to study with her. When they left, they always talked about a new role that for some reason they wanted to get. In the end, Celia simply resigned herself to it, changing a dozen teachers in just a couple of years. One could say that by leaving, they taught her to give up, without trying to adjust the world to her needs. These were valuable lessons that taught her well that she should not get attached to anyone. It's easier to part ways, wishing each other all the best and just maintaining the relationship. Throughout her life, Celia never learned to rely on others, wandering in endless wanderings. She was not used to trusting those whom she had only recently met and in whom she was not sure. And after all, in her first life, no one would have gone looking for the girl if she had disappeared. But this case is special, because there is one person whose actions cannot be assessed otherwise. It cannot be denied that by diving into the depths of the sea, he risked his life to save her. Damon reminds her of her promise. She was obliged to return to the office immediately after the meeting. Instead, Celia went to Death Island for some reason, putting herself in danger. As the guy continued to shower her with reproaches, the world seemed to blur before her eyes. She actually gave her word that she would go in search of Lady Eliza only with him. It turns out that by her actions, she could have taken the lives of both of them. And yet, the time has come to forget the past, allowing yourself to open the door to a completely new world. Returning to the place where they have been eagerly awaiting her home for a very long time. She must leave the past in the past, let all the past grievances rest on the other side. Coming to her senses, the girl feels someone's touch, feeling the warmth of hands. It feels like they're trying to play with her a little, like a little child. It's a little strange that the stranger doesn't remove his hand even after she's completely awakened. He asks her not to be afraid. He is doing this only for her good. However, Celia again reminds that it is high time to remove this warm hand from her face. Well, Keschel tried for her sake, but if a girl asks, there is no point in being offended later. She managed to take pretty good care of one small stolen item. At such moments, the amulet is truly capable of working miracles. It was there just in time. The Count believed that they would meet very soon in a different setting. Everything happened exactly as expected given her talent. Only this time, Keschel asks not to bite his hand, otherwise the abrasion will take 2 weeks to heal. Having finally come to her senses, Celia tries to understand how she ended up in an unfamiliar place. It's strange, but right now she is in the cabin of a ship whose captain is Keschel. I just want to jump out the window and wait for another rescue ship. It seems that the item she took with her turned out to be quite useful. Besides, Damon also arrived just in time. He managed to pull her to the surface. We need to quickly find out how their first meeting after the escape ended. Suddenly, the Count again reminds her of her work, because the girl often searches for people. In this case, she can easily fulfill his request, taking it as a new order. If he decides to order a search for a person, he will probably visit the office frequently. It would be funny to know that this powerful man's fiancée also ran away. After a short pause, Keschel decides to leave a request to search for a person in advance. Otherwise, Celia might find a reason to refuse, like the fact that she has a ton of work on her hands. Something tells me that this case will not concern an offended runaway bride at all. Finally, he decides to give back the very thing that brought benefit to the girl. She was clutching the amulet tightly in her hands when Celia was pulled out from under the water. If you remember, back then the amulet emitted a strange black glow, as if it was endowed with dark magic. But does it really matter if the amulet ultimately called Celia to her savior? Just a few seconds after the amulet was discovered, Damon was able to locate her. This doesn't seem like a mere coincidence at all, meaning Damon must have foreseen this outcome in advance. Only now does she realize that she needs to immediately thank her protagonist. Meanwhile, the ship sails serenely across the endless sea, cutting through the transparent water surface. However, after the nightmare she had experienced, Lady Eliza's mood was far from serene. She hugs tightly the only person who dared to follow her. Continuing to listen to the words of gratitude, she feels it in her heart. Damon watches them quietly from afar, not even hoping to receive the same gratitude. In her eyes, he had matured so much that he no longer resembled a little boy. The first meeting turns out to be rather awkward. Celia simply doesn't know how to behave. I would like to greet him the same way as before, but now something very serious is getting in the way. It really is unusual for her to realize that there is a person nearby who has proven his care. Even though the guy will soon leave her, Celia should not put on a comedy. The girl decides to change her tone by honestly asking Damon if he is her savior. If this is so, then why did the guy tell Keschel about everything and drag him along with him? In fact, the answer to this question is quite simple, but he doesn't really want to admit it. We are talking about a deal that two guys made between themselves quite recently. At this moment, the second participant in the transaction leaves his cabin. It was as if he was deliberately waiting outside the door to remind everyone of his presence in time. We have to believe that during her absence, too much has changed in this life.